Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, Week 13 game-by-game review edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. Happy Sunday night. Hope you guys clinched some of those playoff berths today. If not, we still got like another week, but my goodness, it is December. We have playoff fantasy football on the horizon. Joining me, as always, this lovely Sunday night, MB FantasyLife prodigy, director of analytics. The man holds his company up with one hand. He has his laptop in the other. Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. What's going on, man?
I am good, and that is definitely not true, but thank you. Thank you. We have an awesome team at Fantasy Life. But yeah, I'm freaking having fun being a part of it. That's for sure.
I have a lot of notes, Dwayne. You can see my show sheet here. Usually a couple thousand words. I could probably do less. I never plan the intros, and that's why we get just whatever the hell that just was out there. So regardless, as our lovely guy starting off the chat, Patrick says, boom goes the dynamite. What a throwback there. So guys, just before we get going, my apologies for not having the injury pod on Friday. If you guys were tuned in on Twitter at all, unfortunately, we had a bunch of layoffs at PFF, and that's never fun. And it's unfortunately been a reality in our industry at more companies than just us, and obviously is all throughout the world as well. So obviously I don't want to see any of my colleagues have to leave, and I wish we could all stay and wish we could all make a ton of money. Unfortunately, these were decisions that, were never put by me. I'm not quite important enough to be deciding that, and unfortunately just got to kind of, roll with it. And life sucks sometimes, and get back up and get better. So, Kevin Cole, a guy that I was spending 40% of my podcast with, going to miss him a ton, and loved everything he was able to bring to this specific podcast. I know there's a lot of unexpected points fans out there. Stone Rochelle, everything he did behind the scenes, Doug just being one of the best reporters in the game, in my opinion. So lost a lot of good men out there. And, again, I don't want to say it like that. That's like Wedding Crashers when he's like, lost a lot of good men out there playing for the Yankees. So no one actually died out there, but it really was a sad day for all of us. And accordingly, just wasn't able to really get on, keeping on like we normally do on Fridays. So sad day, but with that, we are all moving on. I know those guys are going to have a ton of opportunities, fantastic talents in the industry, and they will have better days ahead, just like we will here on the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. So appreciate you guys keeping on, keeping in, tuning in. And with that, let's get back to our regularly scheduled programming. Dwayne starting off with, a pretty terrible game, actually. The Browns took down the Texans 27-17, covering as 7.5-point favorites, under cashed at 46.5. And man, if you just didn't watch the game, look at the scoreboard, it's like, oh, Deshaun Watson's back. Wow, this Browns offense must be sick now. Only 6 of those points actually came from the Browns offense. They had a punt return touchdown. Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's actually been doing a fantastic job in that facet of the game for a couple of weeks now. And then 2 defensive scores because Kyle Allen, PFF single lowest graded quarterback on the week. So yeah, Dwayne, didn't see a lot of Deshaun Watson, this new look Browns offense that could even, be close to being called good. Again, this is a bad Texans defense that this version of the Browns offense only had 304 total yards against. That was their second lowest performance of the season. So Watson looked erratic out there. I mean, the amount of balls he just skipped in the first half, very surprising. He did seem to loosen up a little bit in the second half, which is to be expected. The guy hasn't played football since 2020, but I mean, so far, not so good, Dwayne, and it's week 13. Like, we don't have too much time to get this situation, much better here before the end of the stretch.
Yeah, the positive I would say for Watson would be that he had 15% of the team's rushing attempts. He had 7 attempts. Now, he only had 21 yards on it, but you know how this goes. If you've got a quarterback that can run the ball, like, you can live on less. And I'm still just going to bet on Deshaun Watson's talent. I mean, setting aside all the other things about Deshaun Watson, we've just seen him be too good of a quarterback for too long. And he's also got a lot of backyard in his game, right? We've seen this before from him. And so it's not necessarily surprising. He's in a timing offense now that he's having to really, try to work his way back in. And like you mentioned, hasn't played since 2020. So I'm just kind of dusting this one off, with Watson. I mean, it was his first game back. I'll still probably have him inside my top 10 next week. Well, I know I will next week because we got like freaking 4,000 teams on bye. So there's no way that he won't be in the top 10. But it was a bad performance. He did not look good. Only a 55% completion rate. And pretty much every time I saw him on the TV, it was a bad pass. A lot, like, and you mentioned it, first half, a lot of them were skipping at people's feet. Did look a little better in the second half, but I don't think we can overly read too much into it. I guess the biggest concern would be, I mean, for folks, you haven't had Deshaun Watson all along. The bigger concern is if this does continue, Amari Cooper's been having a great season. Now, his target share was still great, 43%. He had 61% of the team air yards. It just wasn't very pretty. He only ended up catching 4 balls. He had 9 targets. Because of a lot of those bad passes, only 44% of Amari's passes or targets were catchable.
I tend to be with you in terms of just throwing this out for the most part. Like, I'm not just going to assume this is a terrible Browns offense. Now, we saw how good they could be with Jacoby. Again, top 10 scoring unit here to get through all that stretch with Jacoby Brissett under center, even if Deshaun Watson isn't quite all the way back to, the best version of himself that we saw, from 2017 and 2020. Even if, today was a bad day and he gets more back to 80, 90% of that guy, I think we're going to have better days ahead for all these guys. So hopefully David Njoku can get healthy for a stretch run. That would certainly help. Nick Chubb is not going to have too many more days against a defense like this with just 80 rushing yards. Would not be overly worried the rest of the season for the Browns. At the Bengals versus the Ravens versus Saints and at Washington, we got a mixture of reasonable enough defenses and, of course, that potential shootout next week in Cincy. On the other side of the ball, Dwayne. So Kyle Allen, my fiance probably could name 5 or 6 total players in the NFL. And Kyle Allen is randomly one of them because he went to high school with like one of her best friends or something. And I just scream about him at least once a week. I just get so mad, Dwayne, at how it started with Curtis Samuel in 2019. And now he's taking Dameon Pierce away from us. But I asked if we could name a future kid of ours, Josh Allen Hartitz. And she said only if we named the next one, Kyle Allen Hartitz, because she was that confident that I would never, ever agree to such a thing. And she was right. So kudos to Julia. But seriously, with Houston, this is killing their offense, man. I'm not saying Davis Mills had it much better, but the one thing we had, the one certainty we had in Houston was Dameon Pierce. The dude doesn't have a rushing touchdown since week 5 now. And yeah, he caught a touchdown between that, but those aren't even a given because Dario Gubawale is going to be taking some of those snaps. And this was even a game where we had Rex Burkhead be a late scratch, and he had practiced in full with the concussion. So that was a little bit surprising. But, Benjamin came in and took a couple snaps. So it was good to see Dameon Pierce, have more than the 16 rushing yards he had over the last 2 weeks combined. But Dwayne, it's been almost a month now, man. I'm just waiting for Pierce to kind of get back to that early season, I guess, goodness. And I don't think we're going to see a big change with this Texans offense in the next 5 or 6 weeks. Just time to, I guess, rank him as more of a low-end borderline RB2 if we haven't been already.
Yeah, I mean, that's where he has to be. That's what I downgraded him to last week in the utilization report. He went from being a high-end RB2 to a low-end RB2. The good news is he wasn't in the split he was in last week. He was really more back to his normal role. He had 78% of the rushing attempts, got back involved in the 2-minute offense with 67% of that. So last weekend we saw in the second half, like he was basically splitting everything with Ogunbowale. And even though today, the game wasn't quite as out of hand as it was last week, seeing him stay on the field, there's at least that. So I think it keeps him. He's a boom bust low end RB2 like Deonta Foreman, right? They're really similar. Like they can come out and they could score 2 touchdowns in a game, but they could also go 5 games in a row without scoring just because it's a bad offense. So we're always leery of the running backs, especially if they're really dependent on the rushing attempts, if they could have game scripts go sideways, which we always knew this could be the case with the Texans. They managed to kind of make their way through that early in the year, and he was scoring fantasy points despite all that, but it's really caught up with him over the last couple of weeks.
Did have another just short from Daria today, which just kind of made me laugh because we have these unfortunate situations in the second half where just when you think Dameon Pierce is about to maybe make up for, the inefficient performance out there, not that it's his fault, we still see Daria just sometimes taking those fantasy-friendly goal line opportunities. Kind of like when Jerick McKinnon's in there for Isaiah Pacheco, but we just get way less of them in Houston, obviously.
Did you see the Nico Collins line? Dude had 11 targets. He had 3 catches. Only 36% of his targets were deemed catchable.
That was actually my only other note that I was just going to bypass. But like, even if this Brandon Cooks like phantom calf injury sticks, like with Nico Collins, it's just like kind of Cortland Sutton all over again, where maybe we can get up to like a mid-tier wide.
Can we just go back to Davis Mills? Like,
I know.
Seriously, like there's no point. You've seen enough of Kyle Allen. We already knew Davis Mills was better than Kyle Allen. Like Davis Mills at least kept the offense like respectable. I kind of feel bad for him. Like it's not like he was surrounded with a bunch of weapons. I mean, it's tough to really run an offense like what the Texans are putting out there, but 11 targets and you catch 3 balls, that's rough.
All right, guys. Next one, Steelers 19, Falcons 16. Obviously, Pittsburgh covered 1 point road favorite under cash at 43. Falcons do have a week 14 bye. So as Dwayne mentioned, 6 teams. I don't know why there's 6 teams on a week 14 bye. I feel like this doesn't benefit them, but it is what it is, and we will roll with the punches regardless. So Deontay Johnson now, Dwayne, 102 targets without a touchdown this season.
How's this possible?
The next closest guy is Tyler Higbee at 76. So he had another couple chances, because when does he not have a couple chances out there with that many targets? He had a drop where probably wouldn't have scored, but would have actually given them a first down. They had to settle for a field goal. And then later, a little bit underthrown, AJ Terrell made a nice play to help back and break it up. But again, multiple chances. And the unfortunate part here with the passing game, Dwain, we're still not getting big time performances from Kenny Pickett. He did have a very nice touchdown to Connor Hayward where he put the nice amount of loft to get it over the linebacker and still find him streaking in the back of the end zone. But like George Pickens today, we can say that he's had a better connection with Kenny Pickett, and he's been probably just a better receiver here more weeks than not this year. Just 2 targets, 1 catch, and 2 yards. I mean, I've been hoping you lose Claypool, you get Pickett out of that really tough schedule that I was reciting every freaking 30 minutes on this podcast, and it just hasn't changed. You look at it now, and my God, man, there's 38 qualified quarterbacks in the NFL that have at least 100 dropbacks. Pickett and Trubisky are 35th and 36th in yards per attempt. I mean, after last year, we said it's Big Ben, can't get any worse than this. Dwain, it has gotten worse than this.
It's gotten worse, yeah. Probably time for a new offensive coordinator. I would say you got to move on from Canada at this point. He's been given his chance with a few different guys to try to work this out. It's not happening. I think we'll see what happens with Pickett long term, but it is disturbing because this is a matchup where you would really hope that he would come out and explode. You're playing against a bad Falcons secondary, and it looked like maybe he would. Like most of this yardage came in like probably the first quarter and a half. Like I want to say he was already at like 130 yards, maybe midway through the second quarter. I'd have to go back and check for sure. And then there just really wasn't much over the rest of the game. Pat Freiermuth was only out there for 55% of the routes. I don't know if you had any injury notes on him. I did not see anything. That's a first.
I think that's just Zach Gentry being a stud.
I knew you were going to say this. It is Zach Gentry. Zach Gentry outsnapped him 74% to 55%. It could have been to do with the game script. The Steelers, are not used to being in close games. So maybe they want to use multiple tight ends or something and run the ball more. I don't know. I mean, they only drop back to pass 48% of the time. Like this has been a team that's dropping back 65, 70% of plays. And so the game script definitely had something to do with it. So I'm not going to worry too much about Freiermuth. I mean, he was still a badass. Like when he was out there, 29% targets per route run, was second on the team behind the Deontay Johnson placeholder, cup holder, whatever it is. Deontay Johnson's not actually physical anything. It's just a holder where something would go. Like fantasy points, but then there's not really anything in there. So Pat Freiermuth, it's probably fine, but just wanted to throw it out there. It's a note.
I saw our guy Denny Carter had a funny tweet. And I've dabbled with this idea in the past. I think we've all made fun of it, but an all opportunity fantasy league, Dwain, realized points, actual yards, touchdowns, none of it matters. We're chasing targets, carries, opportunity, baby. Expected points become the real points. Man, probably Sleeper. Shout out Sleeper. I'm sure they could make that happen if anyone could. Only other notes here. Yeah, you mentioned Freiermuth with disappointing usage, but did have the awesome 57-yard catch and run. So still very nice to see how talented he is as just a second-year tight end. Only other note, Dwain, is the backfield. We were seeing Najee without Jaylen Warren in the picture, getting back to the 85, 90% snap share that he really needs to make up for his general inefficiency. Now today, he was a little bit better, 5.1 yards per carry, and he has been playing a little bit better in recent weeks. That's what happens when you remove a steel freaking plate from your shoe. I'm sure that makes a nice difference, but having Najee out there, 66% of the snaps, he lost a couple targets to Jaylen Warren and 6 carries to Benny freaking Snell himself. So unfortunately, man, still a low-end RB2. I thought we were getting back to the spot where we could go back to Najee as the guy we drafted him to be, but not this year.
Yeah, I was hoping so as well. And now because Snell played just good enough last week when he needed to in a pinch, the coaching staff feels obligated to give him a little bit of work too. It's just kind of a mess. Jaylen Warren did get most of the passing down work, 78% of the long down and distance. They did not use the 2-minute offense, as the aforementioned game script I talked about. 22% of the long down and distance went to Najee. And that's just really a big blow, Ian, because last year, Najee, he got a ton of his points off the check down passes, and those have just not been here this year, and it's very problematic.
Good note from our guy Jeff Tracy in the YouTube chat. Steelers only punted twice, and their offense did look a little better than those old stats show. So that's great, and I hope they do still have another step to take. Their final 4 games here in the fantasy season: Ravens at the Panthers versus the Raiders, and then against the Ravens again. So we've seen that Ravens secondary have their issues, against the deep ball. Obviously, the Raiders have been in their fair share of shootouts. Hopefully, Pickett has been saving his best for last. I know all of us Pickens and Deontay fantasy managers would appreciate that. On the other side of the ball, another, just poorest performance from head coach Arthur Smith. They, again, have a week 14 bye, so we don't need to spend a ton of time on this. It did sound like, Dwayne, that Desmond Ridder could have a chance after the bye. Did you hear that exact quote?
I did not, but I honestly was not. I wasn't paying attention to Twitter from like 5 p.m. on, so I did not hear this. That would be very interesting.
Good for you, man. That's just you touching grass like on a Sunday?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just kind of doing my thing, and the Cowboys game was going to be coming on late, so I needed to kind of get away and not be staring at the computer like the whole time.
You also have like a family, so that's probably not the worst thing in the world to focus on from time to time. Yeah. So, okay, here we go.
I have to have an excuse when the process fails. I have to at least be able to point back to that I did spend some time with my family. You know,
we had that dinner together in week 13. Come on. Okay, here we go. That was a good job by us covering up while I found the exact quote. Falcons coach Arthur Smith said, "We'll evaluate everything, every job." So, okay, he didn't actually say shit about it. Come on, NBC Sports Edge. Be better with the clickbait headlines. Regardless, yes, Marcus Mariota has not been the answer. I took just not by target depth. So we saw, I think, when I did the amount of catchable passes in every NFL offense, the Cardinals were really popping because they don't throw the ball downfield. So not a perfect study. That said, the single highest rate of uncatchable targets in the NFL this season belongs to Marcus Mariota and the Atlanta Falcons. So it can't get much worse. At least we did finally see Drake London get a little bit of volume here, Dwayne. 12 targets, 12 freaking targets for Drake London. That's his most in a game since week 2. The last 3 games combined, he only had 13 targets. The problem is, like, do we expect this to stick? Probably not.
That's the problem. I'm done with the Falcons. I actually recorded a video last week around Cordarrelle Patterson. I took time out of my life to record a freaking video, and I should know better. You don't record anything or even talk about anything to do with Arthur Smith because he's just going to change it the next week. Cordarrelle Patterson, he lost the 2-minute offense to freaking Tyler Algier. I mean, come on. Like, Cordarrelle Patterson used to be a receiver.
He didn't lose it. It was stolen from him, Dwayne.
It was stolen. It was handed away. It was gift wrap. Yes, you're true. It is different. The only thing I will say about London is the underlying ability to demand targets has been there all along. So this is really good for him from a dynasty prospect. You just need an upgrade in quarterback, and then you hope that opens up the playbook. You've talked about Arthur Smith before, and I agree with a lot of it, actually. The only thing that drives me crazy about Arthur Smith is I feel like the dude just outsmarts himself all the time with the way he handles his personnel. Like, I don't have a problem with you're trying to cover up for a bad quarterback. I get it. I don't have a problem with the fact that, you're going to try to stay a little more run balanced or run heavy. You're going to use a lot of play action. All these things can be really good for an NFL offense. We see it work for other teams. But whenever you pull guys like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Cordarrelle Patterson off the field to get guys like Caleb Huntley, Parker Hesse, Olamide Zaccheaus. I know I just said that wrong. I've been working on Olamide's first name, and I just totally screwed it up. Sorry, bro. I'll work on it again next week. But it's kind of mind-numbing. But Drake, he's definitely been demanding targets when he's out there. So we knew he's potentially could have one of these games. It's just this team doesn't want to pass the ball. They have a bad quarterback. And even if you get a 50% target share, you get 15 fantasy points. Where's the ceiling?
I stuck up for Arthur more in the beginning of the year when he was scoring 27, 28 points, and people are freaking out on him on Twitter for not throwing the ball to Kyle Pitts enough. Because it was okay, I hear you, because I have a bunch of Kyle Pitts as well, but the guy's doing his job of scoring points, but hasn't exactly been doing that lately, Dwayne. Over the past 5 weeks now, 17, 15, 27, 13, and now just 16 points. So do something under center. Obviously, the current process isn't, exactly working. At 5-8, they are somehow still alive in the absolute dog shit NFC South. But yeah, you weren't kidding. This really is the CPAT and Tyler Algier show. And honestly, Tyler Algier has been fine with his touches. I'm sure his yards per carry is probably pretty close to 5. It's not been a disaster going from CPAT to Algier by any stretch. I just, as longtime president of the Cordarrelle Patterson fan club, really wish they were giving a lot more to Patterson. But in 5 games since Patterson returned, Algier actually has 129 snaps to Patterson's 128. CPAT has 50 carries. Algier has 47. And that's the part I can somewhat wrap my mind around, Dwayne.
Yeah,
but the fact that but the targets 9 to 5, Michael Pruitt is as involved in the passing game as Cordarrelle Patterson over the past 5 weeks. Come on.
Yeah. Zero targets today. Yeah. So, I mean, that's my problem too. You got to have Patterson involved in the passing game. If you want to split the backfield up 3 ways, Patterson's probably not, you probably don't want Patterson, getting 15 touches between the tackles every game. I totally get that. But yeah, it's, we thought maybe last week We saw the takeover of the passing downs. We saw him with the 22% target share. You piece that together with what they did with Patterson last year, and there was hope. Now there's no hope, Ian. Sorry.
I know, man. It's a sad day. He actually did have a 10-yard rushing touchdown.
Yeah, he did.
Nullified on a holding penalty. And I've not really seen a player that confident that the touchdown was coming back. Like CPAT scored, literally turned out the side of the end zone and went straight back to the huddle. Like
usually when you see the edge sealed so perfectly and there's like no one over there, and I usually immediately, it's the first thing I look for is a holding call when you see such a clean edge like that. And it was I think what was it, a receiver or a tight end? I don't even think it was a tackle that made the hold, but
whoever it was 100% a hold. Like, I'm not going to say it wasn't, but still very much a sheesh. All right. The Packers took down the Bears 28-19. Green Bay covered as 3.5-point favorites. The over cashed out 45.5. Both of these teams have a week 14 bye. So a lot of guys banged up. Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones suffered a shin injury and returned, but then wasn't even playing that much after he returned. I mean, they were giving actual reps in a close game to Patrick Taylor in the fourth quarter. That's how, Aaron Jones's health was going by the end of this one. Obviously, Justin Fields playing through the pain. Even Chase Claypool had a knee injury. So well-timed bye week for all these guys. But we got to talk about the star of the show, Dwain. Christian Watson just keeps on scoring touchdowns. 8 touchdowns in his last 17 touches.
This is the opposite of Deontay Johnson.
It's ridiculous, man. And he's been doing pretty good with the whole yardage thing, too. I mean, 2.3 yards per route run now. Only rookies better since 2015. A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Chris Olave. So I agree with the eye test sentiment where, I'm not confusing Watson for Garrett Wilson, his ability with the ball in his hands. Wilson's obviously got a lot more side-to-side juice. But, hey, Watson, if you give him a straight line, the dude's going to run that fast than just about anyone out there. And then when we look at just, his ability to go up in sky and get the ball, is it as good as George Pickens or even maybe a Drake London? I don't know that I'd say that, but at the end of the day, he's scoring a lot of touchdowns. He's really freaking fast, and Aaron Rodgers is willing to keep giving him one opportunity after another. Dwain, I had Watson ranked as wide receiver 17 this last week. I thought that was irresponsible. I was going more on the talent instead of the volume. And what is he got to be like a top 12 wide receiver after the bye now? Like, how far can we go with this? Because he's clearly a great player. That said, 8 touchdowns on his last 17 touches. I would like for him to not have to be this amazing in order to find the end zone.
Yeah, I get it. But he is also, he demands targets. It's not just all fluky. Now, the Packers don't throw the ball a ton, and they're not putting up a lot of passing yards. So his share of what they have, available to him is a little bit lower than what we would want for someone that would be in the wide receiver 1 conversation. So I think you got to keep him in that wide receiver 2 range, obviously. I know you were just kidding there anyway, but it's one of these guys, though, that when I watch the plays, Ian, I don't think I don't look at it and say, wow, that's a fluke. I look at it and say, wow, that guy's good at football. Like, that's what I think. I'm like, oh, wow, he just burned 2 Cowboys in double coverage for a touchdown deep. Oh, he runs across the face of a defense and they don't realize his speed, and all of a sudden he's wide open for a touchdown because he's so fast. Oh, he catches a ball on a slant and houses it because he can run fast in a straight line, and he can also erase angles with his speed. Oh, he can take an end around and score a touchdown. At some point, like, people just have to admit, like, this guy can score from anywhere. And they're not even really scheming him the ball yet. He's not, like, I don't know how he's not getting more screens, more bubbles, more all this other stuff. Obviously, they did it today to get him the ball in the running game. Like, this guy should have, he's earning 20% of the targets on his own. Like, they should be stuffing the box score with another 10% of targets just based on design stuff. Like, just because, he's just so explosive with the ball in his hands. So I like him as that low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3. But we know the beauty is, it's just one play, and you're good with your wide receiver 2. 2 plays, you have a wide receiver 1 on the week. So yeah, I love him. I do think it's kind of funny that people continue to want to hate on him. I just look at it and think that you have a really good player on your hands.
Yeah, and at this point, like, I think it's kind of been written, man. Like, it's been wrote, whatever the hell you want to say. Like, he's gone out there and he's got 8 touchdowns in his last freaking 4 games of action. So great stuff from Christian Watson. A.J. Dillon, obviously big game without Aaron Jones in there. And yeah, I think coming back from the week 14 bye, we're going to see a healthier version of Jones. But just a good reminder that A.J. Dillon, just like Aaron Jones, one injury to the other guy away from having this sort of every week, 20 touch role that would make Dillon or Jones Obviously, Jones is already cemented in lineups, but without Jones, Dillon would be as well. On the other side of the ball, Kings stay Kings, and Justin Fields is a king. That said, Dwayne, we did see the rushing usage dial back. Now, it didn't matter because he took one of those 55 yards for a touchdown, but in his 5 games before injury, his design rush attempts per game, 12, 5, 7, 10, and 11. Sunday, he had just 3. So they do have the week 14 bye to get him healthier. I'm all the way back in on Fields as a top, 6-5 quarterback after their week 14 bye. Hand up. I know I saw you tweeted out there like you never bench Justin Fields at all. I was that person. I had him a couple lineups with Lamar Jackson and stuff. And in my opinion, it was like, if we have a top 6, top 8 quarterback, I was too worried about Justin Fields not having the rushing volume. But guess what, man? The guy doesn't need much volume, apparently, to go out there and absolutely crush it on the ground. 905 rushing yards and now 8 rushing touchdowns in 12 games this season. Now, his most pass attempts in a game, still just 28. I think it's going to be hard for any of these guys, Kmet, Claypool, and N'Keal Harry, who had an awesome dive and catch downfield randomly. I don't think we're going to get a consistent pass catcher in Chicago the rest of the season. But we have one certainty. It's Justin Fields, and it's good to see he's back healthy because, hey, it wasn't that long ago this was considered a day-to-day injury that could possibly keep him out for the entire season. Justin Fields all the way back in top 6 after the bye.
Yeah, I had him in the top 6 this week. So, once I got the 2 full practice reports and he was taken off the injury report, I was just like, well, screw it. Just because when you looked at his finishes, over the last 5 games, I'm like, okay, who am I going to really start over Justin Fields? So I had him one spot over Lamar, but yeah. I mean, he's in the top 5, top 6, whatever you want to call it. And it's nice. He will get another week to get healthy. So a lot of you start your fantasy playoffs in week 15. And if you've got Justin Fields on your team, you're going to be feeling really good about him starting. I would say for the wide receivers, the one positive I would say is that Chase Claypool hit an 80% route participation rate. He also led the team. Well, Cole Kmet led the team, 28% target share, 24% for Claypool. I agree that it's tough to trust any of these, but some of you are playing in deeper leagues. And so I get a lot of DMs about these deep league kind of questions. And a lot of it's like, hey, you guys didn't talk about this guy on the podcast. So I'll throw him in there. He is a guy that I would look at. It's like an upside wide receiver 4, kind of the way we felt about Mooney, right? Yep. Mooney couldn't really work his way into the consistent wide receiver 3 conversation on a full slate. And I don't think Claypool will either. But if you're playing in a deeper league, there are worse things you can do than have Claypool.
No, I think that's very well said. If you're not going to be top 24, I kind of write you off like you're absolutely nothing, which isn't fair, Dwayne. There are a lot of deeper leagues out there. Just in the backfield, another dominant usage performance from David Montgomery, 78% snaps, 14 carries, and 5 targets. We've said it. He is a volume-based RB2 through and through, who is a lot better at football than people like to give him credit for on the old Twitter sphere. Even his touchdown today, he broke another couple tackles, at least 1 carry a week or reception where Montgomery goes out there and looks like a stud. Looks like that ESPN graphic that was trying to make him out to be 5-6 years ago. That said, Khalil Herbert is on IR, could be back after the bye. So if we do see Herbert come back into the equation and be healthy, it's going to render both of them more so as RB3 types down the stretch. Lions annihilated the Jacksonville Jaguars 40-14, easily covering as 1.5-point favorites over cashed at 51.5. Sun gods stay sun gods, Dwayne, and my goodness, I'm going to keep listing it every week until he busts. Receptions in his last 15 games not impacted by injury: 10, 8, 8, 9, 8, 8, 8, 9, 6, 7, 4, 10, 7, 9, 11. That's a lot of freaking fantasy points, Dwayne. Hell, 2 of those receptions found the end zone this week. Almost had a third. He's gotten stopped at the 1-yard line on my count 3 times in the last month of action, certainly up there in the all-time season leaderboard. So, hey, it's just one of those things, man, where we've had him top 10 wide receiver since the first few weeks of the year, and he got injured and people got worried about it. But guess what? Jameson Williams back, DJ Chark healthy, DeAndre Swift, one of the biggest roles he's had all season, which I know you're going to talk about in just a second. And guess what? They still kept throwing the ball to Amon-Ra St. Brown because he's really freaking good at football. The only wide receivers this year with the PFF receiving grade of at least 90, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. His yards per route run are behind those exact same guys. I mean, I talk about some of these stats, being like the meme of the soldiers and like the clown and stuff. No, this is not it. Amon-Ra is not the clown. I don't know how much more evidence we needed this, Dwayne, because again, I said this last 15 games not impacted by injury. Our small sample size for Amon-Ra is about to get to an entire season. And hey, just I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, I mean, we do love the Sun God. I feel like we've definitely been Sun God cheerleaders throughout the offseason. He kind of led the study, over at PFF I did last year, or looking at the rookie wide receiver grades. I mean, just every data point we could find on Amon-Ra St. Brown, we're like, yep, the guy's going to be awesome. And he has definitely come through. So yeah, nothing else to say there. But you did mention, well, before I jump to Swift, real quick, DJ Chark was out there for 93% of the routes today. He had 48% of the team's air yards, so he led the way. Only a 16% target share, but came through 6 targets, 5 receptions, 98 yards. So Chark is a guy I know a lot of people were kind of excited about when he first came to Detroit, and he came through with a nice game. Now, we will see Jameson Williams slowly work his way back. Josh Reynolds was also back today, but Jameson was out there for 11% of the snaps. Ian, oddly enough, they just wanted him to be a run blocker. He was only out there for 4% of the routes. Hey, how about this? His targets per route run, Ian, on his 4% of routes was 50%. That's really good. Like, that's got to be the best rookie out there. So we'll see what happens with Williams, but he's probably going to work back slowly. And even once he's back, I don't know. Like, is he going to rotate with Chark and Josh Reynolds? Kind of going to have to see what's going to happen there in the passing game. As far as the running back situation goes, you'd mentioned it a second ago with DeAndre Swift. He did take back over the backfield. Do we need to stop and do your clap thing, Ian? Were you?
All right.
Like, we've been waiting a long time. And basically my stance on Swift at this point, Ian, has been, look, I wasn't going to move him up the ranks until I saw this. Now that I've seen it, I'm fine. We can move him up the ranks, but it had been so long and such a long trend. It was just hard to ignore it and just continue like, no, DeAndre Swift's going to be fine. He was fine today. 51% of the snaps, 51% route participation, 45% of the rushing attempts. He handled most of the passing down work, which is something that he earned back last week that we mentioned. So he did keep that. 63% of the long down and distance and 67% of the 2-minute offense. And when they were inside the 10-yard line, 63% of the snaps, and that is an area where we've really seen Jamal Williams handle more of the work. And so those are all really positive for DeAndre Swift. This is the role you were hoping he was in. Also, it had 11% target share. I mean, it's not great, not terrible, but 4 catches for 49 yards and just looked explosive, doing it. In the touchdown he scored, I immediately thought, I bet he got back to the sideline and it was all bottled up on the inside, but Deuce Staley is just like, just put your head down and get to 1 yard. Don't lose 2 yards. And Swift bounces it outside for a touchdown. I wonder how that conversation went. It was probably like, man, you did the wrong thing, but nice job. You're a badass. You scored a touchdown is my guess about how that went. But Swift looks really good, Ian. I don't think this means Jamal Williams is dead. I think Jamal Williams is still going to continue to have a chance to score touchdowns. He scored 1 in this game. He just might not be a 15 to 18 touch player anymore per game. He might be more like an 11 to 13 touch player with still a really good chance to score a touchdown. DeAndre Swift, in my opinion, immediately moves back into the mid-range RB2. If he does this again, like we'll be talking about, should he be in the low-end RB1 conversation?
It was great to see him get that touchdown because he got tackled at the 1-yard line again before he got there. I mean, that Thanksgiving, I know we had a bunch of drinks and turkey afterwards, but the amount of shishi plays he had in that performance, man, just almost scoring time after time. Credit to Dan Campbell Lions being cool to the Swift fantasy managers out there, going right back to him after he got them down there in the first place. But that did not stop Jamal Williams from scoring another touchdown. 14 rushing scores on the season from 2017 to 2021 combined. He had just 13. Kings stay Kings, and Jamal Williams has been quite royal all season long. The only problem, Dwain, like I think you said it right, mid-tier RB2 for Swift. My only hesitancy with throwing him back up in the top 10, top 12 is we still have Justin Jackson there taking 20% of the snaps and 5 targets. So last thing, though, this Swift usage, because let's face it, this one was 40 to 14. This was a situation where we saw the same usage of him having over half the snaps in the first half as well as the second half, right?
Yep. He had 50% of the snaps in the first quarter. He had 49% of the snaps in the first half. So it wasn't just, they're leading. As soon as I put that tweet out there, somebody always like will retweet your thing. Oh, just because of this. And you're like, well, no, I actually looked at that, buddy. Wasn't just that. He was
someone out there was thinking it. Someone out there right now listening to us was thinking it as well.
No, it's a good point. It's a good point. And I'm glad you brought it up because it wasn't just due to the game script. I mean, and it's a good question, right? It's not a good assumption to make, but it is a good question to have because the Lions they were well in control of this game. And if it had all come in the second half, we wouldn't feel near as good about this takeover.
Final point. It was a great revenge game from DJ Chark. Shout out to Zakwa in the chat bringing that up. 5 catches, 98 yards on just 6 targets. So he looks fully healthy out there. And man, if he's making plays, I think we're continuing to see Jared Goff look a little bit more like the person we saw in the first 4 or 5 weeks of the year. So Goff, look, it's going to be, we've seen the highs, we've seen the lows, and we're never going to have anything close to a rushing floor out there. But the Lions do have a manageable schedule down the stretch. Wouldn't be surprised if we see Goff, hitting more of the booms on the bus that he has been experiencing throughout this season. On the other side of the ball, Jaguars, look, beat down loss. Their offense is looking so good the last 3 weeks. I mean, this just could have been
the first drive from Lawrence. I was like, oh, this is going to be a shootout. Like he was dropping dimes.
So I don't know if you want to call it an emotional letdown or just the fact that Lawrence got hurt. Like it looked bad before halftime, but then he came back in the second half and pushed it out. I don't know, because I'm with you, Dwain. He looked awesome early on. The only problem was Zay Jones, dropping every single thing that even got close to his hands. We did ultimately only see them charged with 3 drops, but this has been a recurring thing all season long. Trevor Lawrence leads every quarterback in the NFL with a league high 25 drop passes. Jaguars as a whole, regardless of the quarterback lead, and it's not even been a volume thing. Only the Giants and Titans actually have a higher drop rate this season than the Jaguars. So Lawrence, again, wasn't the best game, but he only took 2 sacks out there. I think he only had 1 turnover worthy play. It was a more passable down game for Lawrence than what we've seen from him over the past season and a half. And I think that's fair, Dwain. Neither you nor me have been this, Lawrence is, the second coming type of guy. I've known he's talented, but there's other people out there that will really pick through, some pretty bad game film and try to, make chicken salad out of it. But hey, wasn't the best game from. I'm happy he's healthy. That's my big takeaway here.
Yeah, the only other thing I would say here for the Jaguars, everything's pretty much the same, but we've talked about it in the past. Christian Kirk is typically going to get his, and then it's going to be one of the other guys, but the other 2 get left out. That's just how it goes. This week it was Evan Ingram, who we've seen be the player that's in the mix in the past. He had a 23% target share, 83% route participation. He came through 7 targets, 5 receptions, 30 yards, but he caught that touchdown. That touchdown is what takes you from being a high-end tight end 2 to being a low-end tight end 1. And Evan Ingram, you win the award this week. Travis Etienne, every down back, even though, it was kind of funny. Last week, as soon as the game's over, I'm fine. I'm good to roll. Doug Peterson, he could have played first practice. We're like, okay, limited. We're limited. He'll work his way up the next day. Nope, limited. He'll get a full practice in on Friday. No, limited. And left is questionable. So just kind of a bit confusing, especially knowing that he had the foot injury last year, but he was out there for everything. I know he only came through with the 8.6 fantasy points for you guys today, 13 carries, 54 yards, but he was out there the whole time. 88% of the snaps. He played all the situations. So good days are still going to be coming for Mr. Travis Etienne.
87% snaps after all that. I mean, that's the wild part. If they would have at least bumped it down to like 70, like, okay. But yeah, he did also lose a fumble. Man, he's lost some fumbles this year. He's had some bad drops and they just don't care. Doug Peterson loves him. Some Travis Etienne should be better. Loves him some Christian Kirk as well. Should have had a short 3-yard touchdown, but Lawrence just, again, had a couple off throws in there. I get it. Also, a bunch of these receivers weren't helping the cause, but did just barely miss Christian Kirk right before he did find Evan Ingram for the touchdown. So didn't end up hurting Trevor Lawrence's stat line, but Doug Peterson, shout out, man. I was screaming at him every week, and Dwain, had to tell me to chill the hell out. Finally, Peterson says, Kirk needs to be up there, getting those 9, 10, 11 targets. Since then, 5, 10, 7, 9, 12, 9, and 8 with 3 rush attempts thrown in. Appreciate you, Doug Peterson, as does every single Christian Kirk fantasy manager out there. We had the Vikings take down the Jets 27-22. Vikings covered as 3-point home favorites, over cashed at a lowly 44 points. Justin Jefferson, tough matchup against Sauce Gardner and company. Didn't see the tight shadow coverage because they don't do that in New York. They trust their whole secondary. Guess what? Didn't matter. Still did a really good job on, if not the game's best receiver, anyone's idea of a top 3 out there. So 7 catches, 45 yards, and a touchdown. Long gain of only 10. Again, this was not a great performance from the Vikings. One of Kirk Cousins' down games. Dalvin Cook did find the end zone, but, wasn't just the most efficient game out there. It was a little bit of a trek there for the Vikings. Credit to them for getting the W anyway. I think you could kind of describe a lot of their games this season with a similar rationale, but just overall, man, again, it's been a pretty condensed offense all season long. We didn't see Hawkinson boom, but still had a solid 6 targets. At the end of the day, Justin Jefferson is on pace for 125 catches, 1,825 yards, and 9 touchdowns. We have Dalvin Cook. We have Hawkinson. If you got anything else to say, Dwayne, go for it.
Nothing else to say. Moving forward.
Also did see real quick, last thing, this is important. Alexander Madison got a random touchdown, and he did that bullshit fake hamstring celebration again. It was Jefferson that did it before. Stop it, Minnesota Vikings. You are freaking us out watching these celebrations where you're faking soft tissue injuries. I hate it. Moving on to the New York Jets. Mike White fell back to earth just a little bit, but still, you look up at the end of the day, 57 pass attempts, 369 yards, no touchdowns, and had a pair of interceptions. But the yards, Dwayne, and just his passing volume. I mean, going into this game, and this will be a little bit impacted by the fact that at halftime, it was 20-6 in favor of the Vikings. Jets were constantly playing from behind. But if you looked at the games that just Flacco or Mike White were under center, third most pass happy offense in the league. And that's something that you brought up going from Flacco to Zach Wilson, was the concern that we weren't going to see this offense be quite as pass happy. Well, they are. And because of that, even though Mike White will have some, downs to go with a few ups here, we got Garrett freaking Wilson looking like the stud he was drafted to be. 8 catches, 162 yards on 15 targets. And I had Red Zone on. This was not one of my 3 games I was trying to watch alongside that. I saw you tweet, Dwayne, Garrett should have had an even bigger day.
He should have, he should have had another 50 yards and probably a touchdown. Yeah, Mike White overthrew him. He cooked the DB. I think it was Peterson that he cooked and just laid it out a bit in front of him. But yeah, it's this guy is a badass. This guy is a complete stud. Getting open, can do it, can beat you over the top, can beat you underneath. He's got run after the catch. I mean, he was our number one. I'm so glad to say he was both of our number one, coming in. Absolutely looks the part. I mean, just an electric playmaker.
In 2 games with Mike White, 13 catches, 257 yards, 2 touchdowns on 22 targets. Gotta love that on the season. 17th among 57 receivers, regardless of your experience in yards per route run. 10th in PFF receiving grade. We're getting a little bit of the Terry McLaurin effect here, where no, you don't see Garrett maybe as a top 10 receiver in your traditional, more counting productive stats, but you lift up the hood just a little bit and you'll see just how good he is. But yeah, number 9 in PFF receiving grade, Chris Olave. Number 10, Garrett Wilson. How about them apples? So look, with Mike White at this point now, over the past 2 years in a 48 quarterback sample, he's 36 in PFF passing grade, 47th in average target depth. He has the 3rd highest turnover worthy play rate, but he's 8th in yards per attempt. So no, I continue to not be convinced that Mike White is the long-term answer under center, albeit, hey, he has only had 5 starts now. The guy can certainly get better out there, but just the fact that they trust him enough, Dwayne, is enough for me to trust at least Garrett Wilson in this passing game here moving forward. Also potentially one man, bam, that man, Zonovan Knight out here going out there. No Michael Carter, and he did end up leading the way. 55% of the snaps, 15 carries, and 5 targets. They've now given this dude, 37, I believe? Yeah, 37 combined touches in back-to-back games. And he's gone over 100 total yards in those as well. So, again, didn't get a chance to watch grind this film just yet, so I can't speak on just how good he looked out there. But 6 yards per carry, who cares about the style points? That seems like it's going pretty well. Thoughts on Zonovan Knight rest of the season, Dwayne?
I think he's looked really good both games. I have not got to go back and watch all of this one. I did go back and watch everything from last week because I was trying to figure out what to do with him in the ranks. And I think he's their lead early down back probably the rest of the way. I mean, I think Michael Carter comes back and should take over passing. We'll see. Carter could still be, the lead early down, or they could more split those. But he is definitely past James Robinson. Like, James Robinson is not a worry at all. James Robinson was active today, only played 11% of the snaps. Zonovan Knight had 65% of the rushing attempts today. Like, I was hoping he would get to 50%. He more than, covered that. And he's also been, he's just been surprising me in the passing game. And I read, some stuff from Matt Waldman last week where he talked about how, he actually was pointing back to one of his profiles where he talked about how Knight was actually the sneaky good receiver. Most people just, when you hear a running back's name is Bam, like, you don't really think much about his, his passing game skill set, but just talked about how he was really, a high caliber, not like an elite receiver, like an Eckler or anyone like that, but someone that was certainly capable, right, in the passing game. And they gave him 40% of the 2-minute offense today. And he came up with 5 targets, 5 catches for 28 yards. So, I mean, it's real. And we know with Mike White that you are going to get checkdowns to the running backs. That's one thing that we've seen for sure. 92% of their snaps inside the 10 went tonight. So he's also the guy that they want on the field when they're close to scoring position. Those are all good things when you got a defense like the Jets, who can keep you close in games typically, and that keeps the running game in play. So I like him. We'll have to see what happens when Michael Carter gets back. At that point, I mean, you're probably looking at him as, he's going to be in the RB3 conversation. It really just depends, man, because I could see them easily just be like, look, let Carter play the passing down role. We don't see Ty Johnson. Or they could be like, no, Michael Carter's going to be more the lead down back, right? And then that would really hurt Zonovan Knight. When Michael Carter comes back, it's hurting one of these two, right? It's either going to hurt Knight or it's going to hurt Johnson. So we'll see what happens.
When we got Jeff Smith pretty much out of the situation, he was inactive. Beggars can't be choosers, man. You're talking about Ty Johnson getting out of the equation. I don't know about that. All right, NFC East showdown. We had a freaking tie. I hate it. Giants 20, Commanders 20. Giants covered as 2.5-point dogs. The over-under pushed to 40. God bless anyone out there having to sweat that throughout overtime. The Washington Commanders do have a Week 14 bye on their horizon. So let's start off with Washington. I mentioned that stat earlier talking about the Falcons having the lowest rate of catchable passes this year. Then there's the Bears, and then there is the Washington Commanders. So luckily, these receivers are so damn good that it just doesn't matter. I mean, Terry McLaurin managed to go for 105 yards and a touchdown. Curtis Samuel was showing up again. That was pretty good to see. Jahan Dotson, game-tying touchdown at the end of regulation, showing off some yak goodness, man, that we haven't even seen much of this year. He's mostly been making his living with some nice routes, contested catch goodness, but seeing that as well goes to show you why he was the 16th overall pick in the draft. So my big takeaway, Dwayne, is I continue to be underwhelmed by Taylor Heinicke. He did a little better today, not throwing a pick, but, we did still have 2 fumbles and 5 sacks out there. There's good to go with Taylor Heinicke, and a lot of quarterbacks can't even get the good. There's just a lot of bad, and I'm not convinced that he is going to be the long-term future here. Fantastic long-term backup. Taylor Heinicke and Jacoby Brissett, these guys should play until they're 45 years old. I just don't think they should be entrusted with the future of one of these, multi-billion-dollar franchises. So big take there. But these wide receivers, man, I feel like these Washington wide receivers are what we were hoping the Panthers and Broncos were over these last 2 off seasons. You like that one, Dwayne? I love it.
I saw your tweet. I just love Terry McLaurin. Like Jahan Dotson, it was a good game for him, 23% target share. He's just not been able to demand targets so far on the season. Like he is very distant, like in the 3rd, 4th, spot in the pecking order on the team. But maybe this is something that sparks him. You mentioned him showing off the yards after the catch. That's something that I kind of thought that he would be good at. But with the way they use Curtis Samuel in the offense, it's kind of forced Jahan Dotson. It might be a really good thing for Jahan Dotson's growth trajectory, but he's been forced to play outside, right? He's been forced to learn immediately in his rookie season. How do you beat coverage over the top? How do you play on the outside? You're not always going to be protected in the slot because they've really used Samuel more in that role. So potentially that's something that's good for him in the long term. Not every rookie can just come out and blow up in their first season. I'm with you on Heinicke. He's just a roller coaster, man. One week he's going to throw for 150, and then but it's good to know that on the roller coaster, that there is a high, right? It's not all lows. Like you can get a high out of Taylor Heinicke.
I see what you did there. All right, final thing on Washington. Brian Robinson didn't quite get the backfield takeover from a snap standpoint. It still was Antonio Gibson, 51% to 45%, but 22 carries for Robinson to just 9 for Gibson. And unlike when they were really kind of arguably rushing him back to action, I don't know how else to explain just how much better he's been over the past few weeks than when he started out, because over the last 2 weeks, 4.6 and 5.8 yards per carry. I mean, he didn't even clear 3.8 yards per carry in the first 7 games. So I get it. The idea with Brian Robinson is he's a battering ram, 225, 230, whatever he is, and he can pick up those extra yards after contact. Wasn't really there to start. It has been since. So good stuff from him. Unfortunately, Dwayne, with Gibson still being plenty involved, especially on passing downs, with Robinson, going to be tough to really get him out of that low-end RB2 range.
Yeah, they're still in their same roles. Gibson handled almost all of the passing down work. Brian Robinson handled most of the early down work. 62% of the rushing attempts to Robinson, 24% to Antonio Gibson.
On the other side of the ball, Saquon Barkley, another game where it wasn't bad. He found the end zone, ended up with, 81 total yards, but just on 23 touches, home matchup. I've been wishing we were getting a little bit more from Saquon here down the stretch, Dwayne. Maybe just beggars or, we can't be choosers. I said that a couple minutes ago, but he's been under 100 total yards in 4 of his last 5 games. he looks a million times better than last year, but I still don't think we've seen the return of 2018, 2019 Saquon. Maybe it looked like that in the first month and a half of the season, but at the end of the day, you just start pulling up the numbers, man, and missed tackles for us, yards per carry, yards after contact per carry. They tell us he's been a pretty average running back. And honestly, I think the receiving work has been the most disappointing. I mean, he's 33rd out of 39 backs and PFF receiving grade, 29th in yards per route run. I just don't see, I'm not holding my breath every time he touches the ball like I used to at prime Saquon. And maybe that's just what happens when you have, 1,000 or however many NFL touches he's had put on the legs. Am I overthinking this? The usage is still fantastic. We're starting him no matter what, but I feel like it's been a little bit disappointing for Saquon in the second half relative to where I thought we were going after the first 6 weeks of the season.
Yeah, I agree. It's been a little bit disappointing, and he's picked up some little nagging injuries here or there. And it could just be, age is catching up with him. It could also just be the next week he throws up 40 burger and we're just like, oh, wow, there's Saquon Barkley.
Remember that stupid thing Ian said last week?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I do think the receiving part is like, that's something I've noticed as well. And that's kind of been a season long trend, right? He's getting some of the targets. Like he had 5 targets for 5 receptions today, but only 18 yards. If you look at his ADOT, he's not working down the field as much as some of the elite guys like Eckler. And I know Kamara's been down as well, but like CMC, these other guys that really work more into the first read passing game, if you will, he's really still been more of a check down guy, which you would kind of like to see them just scheme him up more. It's not like you've got a lot of other weapons on the Giants, but like his ADOT was a minus 4.4 today. Yards per route run, 0.62. So I think the targets are there, but he's not really getting schemed up for these big type of plays. It's really more, oh, wow, everyone's covered. Well, of course they are because your receivers aren't very good. And then they throw it to Saquon Barkley. So I think that's part of the struggle. Couple other quick notes, and then you can hit what you want on the Giants. But Daniel Bellinger did return today, and he had a 97% snap rate and an 83% route participation. He's third on the team in target share at 18%. So I know he's a guy that, look, I get it, but we have a lot of people that listen to this that play in tight end premium leagues and things like that. So Daniel Bellinger matters in that kind of scoring format, and he was out there. So if you're really hurting at tight end and you've got bye week, hell coming up next week, and you may be trying to make it into the playoffs, I don't know who your tight end is. Daniel Bellinger is a name that you can potentially use.
We did get another nice performance from Darius Slayton. I know he had an inopportune drop at the end of the game, but still 6 catches, 90 yards. I mean, you just look at his PPR finishes over the past month and a half or so. Wide receiver 22, 73. That's a dud. But then 19, 35, 15, 22, a dud with 53 last week, where he was a lot closer, doing more in that game against the Cowboys. And then today saw a performance that will probably get him at least in the top 36 or so. So Darius Slayton, similar to some of these other guys. Chase Claypool, I don't think of them all that differently. There's just not enough volume to go around. So it's good to see him taking a lot of it that is available. I'm way more interested in Darius Slayton over Richie James. Is he going to be someone that's in the top 24 anytime soon? No, but to Dwain's earlier point, deeper leagues and all that, Darius Slayton might be able to give you some low-end wide receiver 3 finishes down the stretch. Philadelphia Eagles took down the Tennessee Titans 35-10. Philly covered as 4.5-point favorites over cash at 44.5, just barely, thanks to them Eagles. And man, Dwain, I've been podcasting as much every year, and when Kevin, or just this year, obviously, and when I've been doing the NFC and AFC previews with Kevin, one of the things I've been bringing up with Jalen Hurts and the Eagles offense is like, we hadn't seen him go to the air all that much recently. We had the game against the Steelers where AJB went bonkers, like a month ago, but more so the Eagles have been able to run on a lot of these teams. And it's not that Hurts has been inefficient. He just hasn't really had the raw passing totals. And I wonder if this Titans team being so good against the run could maybe force the Eagles to play more one-dimensionally. And I tried to back this up by saying, like, look, we're grasping at straws a little bit here because this offense is awesome, but I'm just trying to get the full picture here. And yeah, that was a waste of everyone's time. Jalen Hurts is the freaking man, rushing, passing, whatever you ask him to do, man. And yeah, guess what? A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, they deserve a ton of credit for being so great at their jobs. AJB, 119 yards and 2 tutties, and another great revenge game performance today. And Devontae had 102 yards and a touchdown in his own right. So yeah, sure, the pass catchers are part of it. The pass catchers are always a part of it. At the end of the day, though, this passing offense, whoever you want to give the credit to, is pretty damn good, just like every other piece of this Eagles offense. I mean, I took the PFF team grades from the different facets of the game. Their overall offense ranks 2nd. Their rushing offense ranks 10th. Passing 4th. Receiving 6th. Run blocking 6th. Pass blocking 1st. Man, Dwain, this looks a lot like the most complete offense in the NFL, and Jalen Hurts is spearheading it. Fantasy MVP at the quarterback position, real life MVP at the position. I'd probably still lean towards Mahomes, but it's close. And my God, that's amazing, because I know I went on some podcasts, and especially Dynasty realm, and I didn't know if Jalen Hurts was going to be their 2023 starter. Yeah. Dumb freaking thing to say, Ian. He looks fantastic. He has looked fantastic all season long, and the future can only be brighter, man. If he improved this much from his rookie year to his second year, and now his second year to his third year, Jalen Hurts. Here we go, Dwain. 2 claps. Now, whatever. Whatever you got to say.
I think he deserves 3, to be honest. So you should add 1 on. But no, there's nothing really to add here, man. Like, he's playing great, and I think you called it. Like, looking at the Tennessee defense, really good against the run, really bad against the pass. Like, their underlying metrics for their pass coverage weren't as bad, but they were definitely giving up the yards. And so I thought it was smart. Like, the coaches, this shows you the confidence they have in Jalen Hurts. This wasn't a situation where they came out and tried to pound it and couldn't, and then thought, oh no, we're going to throw it. No, they came out and the game plan was, we're going to throw the ball on Tennessee. And I think that's awesome. And that also tells you how complete of a team they are, the trust that they have in all the different facets of their offense, whether it is running the ball, if they need to, they know they can win the game that way. Now, if they just want to air it out, they can. The one guy that I do think continues to look, AJ Brown's awesome and I love him. But Devonta Smith is like, just the last few weeks, like, just demanding like elite target shares. Did come through today with 8 targets, 5 catches, 102 yards and a receiving touchdown. But just a guy that I think it's easy to miss him because he's playing right next to AJ Brown. But this is a guy that was really good in his rookie season, having a really good second year campaign as well. Like, I love these guys. I love both of them. I mean, Dallas Goedert being out has been a big thing for Devonta Smith. He's the guy that's seen the biggest uptick in targets. AJ Brown's kind of stayed where he was. He probably will when Dallas Goedert returns. When Goddard does return, he's still got another week before he can come back. That could hurt Smith, but you just have to give him credit. He's playing really well right now.
I want more of that. Every time T. Higgins does anything good, we hear he's a wide receiver 1. He's just on the same team with Jamar Chase, which, yes, that's fine. I'm not here to slander T. Higgins, but let's hear that for Devonta Smith out there too, man. I mean, again, did not win the Heisman by accident. Anytime you're a wide receiver at 22 coming out, you're getting half a dynasty Twitter putting you down and this and that, but just put on #watch the film. The dude's out there. The route running just continues to be incredible. And man, what's he weigh? $170 or whatever. We had to talk about that for an entire offseason. Plays like he's at least 2 bills out there, Dwain. So size of the heart in the man. Am I right? But yes, we did have some people pointing out rightfully in the comments. And to your point, they never tried to run the ball. So when we see Miles Sanders only having 10 carries out there, I'd be a lot more concerned if it was, Miles Sanders only having 10 carries and Kenneth Gainwell or Boston Scott all of a sudden having these big enhanced roles. But that didn't really change. I believe the Eagles get the Giants' league worst defense in yards before contact allowed per carry at least once, if not twice here during the final few weeks. I'm going to be feeling a lot better about Miles Sanders back in as, a low-end RB2 there. But guess what? He's a low-end RB2, or at least this early down running back in one of the league's best offenses. So him, like Isaiah Pacheco, they're going to get the benefit of the doubt over guys that aren't going to have this many scoring opportunities. And just shout out Miles Sanders, man. This man said, don't draft him in fantasy football, only to go for 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns in his first 12 games of the year. Pretty nice year from Miles Sanders, Dwain. You can still score fantasy points without catching passes.
Yeah, he looks good. And the backfield, to your point, it still looks the same. Boston Scott got a little bit of extra work, but again, this game was over. So a lot of that came at the end of the game. But Sanders, yeah, I mean, you're in a good offense. You have a good offensive line. Even though he's not catching the passes, it's okay. There are all sorts of different paths or recipes to having successful fantasy seasons. Miles Sanders is in one of those.
Only final notes I had, Devonta Smith almost had a bigger game. He had a potential 40-yarder in his hands. Also really good defense. Just a sheesh, not a drop. Also, AJ Brown, seldom seen reverse sheesh. He had a 41-yard touchdown get actually overturned after they looked a little bit closer and they saw his foot was just out of bounds. Very next play, runs a double move. Cornerback just couldn't deal with the strength and fell down. I said it before, but when Evan Silva comped, and I'm sure he wasn't the only one to comp him to this, but when Evan Silva comped AJ Brown to just modern day Terrell Owens, I've never seen it as clearly. That's certainly about how good he's been to start his young career. And again, that is a hell of a comp to get. And I don't take that lightly. Quez Watkins did get injured with a shoulder injury, so it won't be that big of a deal out there. Probably just a little bit more Zach Pascal anyway. On the other side of the ball, Treylon Burks, a really unfortunate concussion out there. That was wild, Dwayne, to see him still hold on to the ball upon getting, his head taken off pretty much on a 25-yard touchdown over the middle. I hope he's okay because, man, this is a dude that's really, maybe not having quite the raw touchdown totals as Christian Watson, but in terms of him just coming out over the past 3-4 weeks and showing what he can do, just like Christian Watson, man, you can say that Treylon Burks, he had that big catch at the end of the game against the Packers, and he scored the touchdown when Derrick Henry fumbled it. Okay, that's fine. I've seen more than enough to know that this dude is a really good receiver. I mean, we were wondering if he was just more of a gadget guy and couldn't even exist as, a legit NFL number one. Not sure how much time he's going to miss, but I no longer have those questions about Treylon Burks moving forward.
Yeah, he looks great, and he's coming through with absolutely huge plays. Yes, he recovered a fumble last week for a touchdown, but I mean, he also played really well as a receiver, and he happened to be hustling. He was in the right He was in the right place. We had concerns about Treylon Burks, right? All the asthma stuff in the preseason. It seemed like he and Mike Vrabel just, were rubbing each other the wrong way. So to me, these are just all positive things. And talk about reminding me of Terrell Owens, like, that's Burks. Like, he's just, this big frame dude. He's a run after the catch guy. And that touchdown actually reminded me of when Terrell Owens caught that touchdown pass in the wild card.
Yeah.
Yeah. The wild card game. It was like 99, 98, something
Packers.
like that. It was against the Packers. It was a long time ago, but kind of reminded me of that same play, minus the concussion. But like, for him to hang on to that and come through, it's just another big play. Yeah. And I think we've seen the Titans offense in the past. You get this run game going, you get the play action going, and you can get, these receivers open and behind the linebackers, in front of the safeties. You let them run after the catch. I think Burks is built perfectly to do that. Like, you don't have to be the best route runner in the world to do that. You can just be an okay route runner, and then you can just let his physicality take over the game. Hopefully, to your point, he's healthy and we get him back for the next game, because I'm just super excited to see how he can finish out this year. Like, overall, this rookie receiving class, has just really impressed me more than I thought it would. I mean, we've got multiple guys that I think have shown us that they can play in the league.
Now, with Derrick Henry, has been a slow stretch here. We've had him hit a couple big plays in the receiving game in past weeks to save the day, find the end zone here or there, but ultimately yards per carry wise, last four, 2.8, 3.2, 2.2, and just 2.7. So has been slowing down. I think a big part of that, I touched on it in my weekly running back column, is he faces a higher percentage of 8-man boxes than any other running back in the league when they're running the ball. Are we worried? Are we concerned? Absolutely fucking not, because you look at the schedule, Dwayne. I don't know who let this happen, but they get the Jaguars, the Chargers, and the Texans over the next 3 weeks. Look out, King Henry about to come.
If you can still make trades in your league and you can find some sucker that thinks that Derrick Henry's hit a wall, like, oh my God.
Go get him. And
go get it.
Just a small reminder too, and we've seen Samaje Perine kind of come out of nowhere and really make some people some nice, nice fancy performances. And the two other just handcuffs that would be pretty important. I'm not saying as good as Perine, but they're out there with these really high up running backs. Dontrell Hilliard with the Titans. Yes, we'd see some Hassan Haskins, but I think it'd be more Dontrell Hilliard, and Matt Breida with the New York Giants. So again, not on Perine's level, I don't think, or Pollard or Madison or any of those guys. But if you're talking about handcuffs that are only available in 2-3, if probably, they're available in 97 or more percent of leagues, I guess you could look at Hilliard and Breida for the deeper rosters. Ravens took down the Broncos 10-9. Just a great game here. Broncos covered as 9-point dogs, under cashed at 40.5. Another unfortunate injury. Talk about Lamar Jackson with the knee. Not going to be season ending, but Harbaugh would not put an exact timetable on it, calling it day to day or week to week. These coaches are just screwing with us more than ever this year, Dwayne. We had the Joe Mixon one being taken every 12 hours. Like, what is next? I cannot wait to find out. Maybe I can't wait to find out. But regardless, with Lamar potentially going to miss some time, we have seen Tyler Huntley give us some pretty damn good fantasy contributions. And obviously, we want Lamar to be back as soon as possible, as we do with all these injuries. But the nature of our job is to be these heartless fantasy analysts where we just kind of move on to the next man up. So I'm going to do that now, Dwayne, and look at Tyler Huntley and these extended performances he's had, because, man, 6 extended performances now. Rushing yards, 40, 45, 73 with 2 touchdowns, 54, 72, and then 41 with another touchdown today. And I mean, he's had at least 6 carries in all these games, while also averaging 205 passing yards per game. Now, only one of those games has been in this year, and, a lot came last year with a different offense. but Lamar's only at 203 passing yards this season. So I'm not here to say Lamar to Huntley is, not a big change. You can look at any of the passing metrics from Huntley, and I think you see a similar thing as what I was talking about with Mike White. The counting numbers might be there. The efficiency numbers are not. 47th among 48 quarterbacks in terms of yards per attempt over the past 2 years, 35th in PFF passing grade. Dwain, I'm pretty sure Tyler Huntley is not a really good real life quarterback, but he might be a really good fantasy quarterback. Where do you see yourself ranking Huntley here over the stretch run if Lamar Jackson remains sidelined?
Yeah, he'll be a high-end RB2 because, if you can come up with 40 to 60 yards rushing per game and be somewhere between 175 and 225 passing, and we get a chance to get a touchdown rushing and a touchdown passing, it's just hard for you to not be a QB1. It's kind of the way we've treated Daniel Jones here lately, right? Once they've really just let him start handling more of the rushing duties, they're very similar players, to me. So somewhere in that range, especially next week, you're going to have, who else on bye next week? Anyway, it doesn't matter. He'll be he's a high end, he's a low end, high end QB2 on a full slate. So if you got a slate with less games than that, then obviously he moves up.
Speaking of those week 14 buys, I got you, Dwain, as long as my page loads here in a second. Here we go. Falcons, Bears, Packers, Colts, Saints, and Commanders. So really only losing Justin Fields out of the main conversation. But regardless, top 15 option. So we can say that with a level of confidence. They get the Steelers, the Browns, the Falcons, and the Steelers down the stretch. Now, I think the Steelers, they've had some bad games. They're a little bit better than some of those, metrics indicate. They didn't have TJ Watt for a while. Even Fitzpatrick missed a game or two. That said, with those rushing yards, I do think that he could have a chance to, again, just be better in fantasy than real life. In terms of the backfield, it was Kenyon Drake on, fortunately for him, unfortunately for Gus Edwards managers, getting back and really involved. It does sound like J.K. Dobbins could be back soon. I just don't really want anything to do with this backfield, Dwain, because unfortunately, the Ravens haven't run the ball as an offense enough to make up for how involved the quarterback is with this. When you look at the Bears, their running backs are still, I believe, top 5 in carries, despite everything Justin Fields is doing. You look at the Ravens in the backfield collectively this year, dead last in targets, and I believe they were 30th in carries among their running backs going into this one. So any inclination that Gus or Dobbins could help down the stretch, I don't really have any.
I don't either, man. You want to lean into Dobbins, but they're, even once he's back, they're not just going to give him everything, So, but no one else has been impressive. I'll say that. So the Gus thing surprised me today, to be honest. I really thought he would be probably 40, 50% of the rushing attempts today. So I do wonder if he got hurt. I was watching the game at one point, and when I saw him get tackled, he looked like he might be hurt, but I never saw anything on it. We never got a notification that he left the game. But sometimes these guys, they can get banged up and then they just don't play very much the rest of the game, and then nobody really says anything about it. I think it really could be one of those scenarios, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You just don't want to mess with this thing. It's a nasty, run game to begin with. It's a 3-way committee. You got to really see one of them assert themselves. But we kind of saw that last week with Edwards. He kind of took over. He was 50% of the rushing attempts, if I remember correctly, last weekend. Made me think, okay, fine. You can put him at that high-end RB3 range. You're probably going to get 10 to 15 attempts out of him. It's, Latavius Murray type territory, but on an offense that we probably at least like better than the Broncos. But he wasn't able to come through. And that's really all I have. The only other thing I would say is Mark Andrews continues. He's fine. He's getting the targets, but he's kind of like the Saquon Barkley conversation, right? The underlying stuff is all there, but you're like, where's the real Mark Andrews? Where's the Mark Andrews that plays more like Travis Kelce? We just have not seen that since the injuries earlier this season.
We did see him have some pretty nice games with Tyler Huntley and even Josh Johnson down the stretch of last year. We saw him have plenty of nice games with Lamar Jackson too. So similar to Saquon Barkley, guess what? It's like a going down with the ship type of fantasy player. You're starting him and hope for bigger days down the stretch. We did see Isaiah Likely miss a little bit of time here with a shoulder injury. So just a small little thing to keep on looking for there. Otherwise, onto the Broncos side. The only thing I care about with the Broncos anymore is our guy Kent's Russ bathymometer, just seeing what's going on here. Because if you guys don't know, Russ's mansion, he has 12 bathrooms in his mansion. He needs to average one passing touchdown per game to reach his passing, to reach the bathroom total at this point. So yeah, the offense is atrocious, dead last in scoring. They've scored 10, 16, 10 and 9 points since their bye, so that's a good time. And Latavius Murray is still dead last among 53 running backs in yards after contact per carry. Cortland Sutton got hurt with a hamstring injury. I like seeing Jerry Jeudy back. Greg Dulcich actually had a decent game. He's probably sadly enough, the one guy we can trust most in this offense. And anything else, Dwayne, because I got nothing. And along with the Houston Texans, the amount of time and energy and vocal cords that the Denver Broncos and Houston Texans have wasted this year, shame on them.
Yeah, there's nothing here. I mean, Dulcich would have been my only point, 35% target share. He had a couple of down games, so that was nice to see. And if some of you maybe had, just gotten David Njoku back like we had in a couple teams and you got to throw Dulcich in, like you feel pretty good about it. He came through for you. So, but that's it, man. Yeah, we do not need to waste any more time on the Broncos.
Moving on to the 4:00 slate, Seahawks took down the Rams 27-23. This was a fun one. Comeback Geno was on display. The Rams did still cover, though, at 6.5-point dogs. The over cashed at 41. So just with the Seahawks, man, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, and we talked about Higgins and Chase and Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. I mean, these guys deserve to be right up there in any conversation of the best two wide receivers, just the best duo, I should say, in the NFL. Lockett, 9 catches, 128 yards and a touchdown. Metcalf, 8 catches, 127 yards and a touchdown. Lockett has now scored in 5 straight games. Metcalf had the game winner over Jalen Ramsey, who is now tied with AJ Terrell. 7 touchdowns allowed in their direct coverage, most in the NFL. That is not good. Metcalf joined A.J. Brown as top receivers on the week, who had a perfect passer rating when targeted. And it's funny, Dwayne, because I remember reading these numbers about Geno Smith like back in week 4 and week 5, and we're like, oh yeah, how long can this cute, Cinderella storyline keep up? It's week 13, man, and he is 4th in PFF passing grade, 2nd in passer rating, 4th in yards per attempt, 4th in adjusted completion rate, and he just had a week high 6 big-time throws. He is doing it in style, man. This is the opposite of someone dink or dunking. Like if fantasy gave out style points, Geno Smith would be the QB1 out here with what he's doing through the air. I mean, it's just been an awesome offense, and we know that now with the passing game. Do you think that we could see Geno and these receivers put up even bigger numbers down the stretch? God forbid Kenneth Walker misses some time with this ankle injury. We don't know the full extent of it just yet. Pete Carroll said he, quote unquote, jammed his ankle, and we'll see. And if you guys aren't experienced with getting injury updates from Pete Carroll, that's probably what we're going to be used to here over the next couple of weeks. So thoughts on, I guess, the overall Walker injury, Dwayne, and if we could see, again, Geno in this passing game really open things up down the stretch accordingly.
Yeah, well, I think what we've seen is really the teams that have a little more balance, or they have a quarterback that can move around, have actually been better this year on offense than the traditional, hey, we're just going to drop back and throw it all the time, because everybody's running so much coverage over the top. But Geno has been one of the guys that we've talked about. There's only a few that are really, what we consider still, not that he can't move around, but he's really a pocket passer. And he's coming through with these 275 yards this year is the new 325, right? And Geno's been right around that number like most games. Today he came through with 367. That's like 500 yards in the NFL this year with the way defenses are playing coverage. But 3 passing touchdowns. I mean, he's got the 2 receivers to do it. So I would never doubt it, but we'll probably see him be around where he's been, probably between 275 and 325, 2 passing touchdowns. But in this season, I mean, that's a low-end QB1 every week. But what I like about today, Ian, is he did show he has that ceiling to be the QB1 overall on a slate. We hadn't seen that version of Geno since probably the Detroit Lions game. Now he's been really good, but it's been consistently right in that middle to low-end, quarterback ranking every week. So it was nice to see it. And it is awesome just when you're like, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf are really good. Like, we'll just throw it to them a bunch, and it can work out really well for you.
So we will see DJ Dallas potentially leading this backfield. I mean, he did go out there and have a team high 49% snaps, 10 carries and 1 target, but we also got Tony Jones. Is Homer still on IR?
He was sick. He had an illness.
Oh, that's right.
Out of the game. So, and I didn't say anything about the backfield because there's really not. DJ Dallas was hurt. He got knocked out of the lineup. Then he came back in. I think Tony Jones had an injury and left the lineup and came back in. So it's really one that we can't decipher, to be honest. We'll have to wait and see what we hear this week. Probably not a situation that I'm going to want to trust next weekend, even if we know for sure that Kenneth Walker's going to be out.
On the Rams side of things, John Walford was also playing through the pain out there in and out of the lineup with, I believe, an ankle injury in his own.
Dude, it was nasty. It got stepped on and turned completely the wrong way. I could not believe it when he was back on the field the very next drive. And he scrambled for like 15 yards. I have new respect for John Wolford. I don't know if he'll ever play another snap in the NFL, but the dude has my respect because, like, when I saw what happened to him, I was like, I wouldn't get up. I would be in an air cast, like immediately on my couch, Ian. I wouldn't have done the podcast. I wouldn't have even walked in here to do the podcast. This dude went back out on the field. I would have just been texting you, bro. I can't walk to my office, 20 feet. John Wolford was back out there with NFL defenders chasing his ass and not looking too bad doing it. So a lot of respect for that.
Proud of you, John Wolford. And he did have some nice throws out there, man. Tutu Atwell almost had a 25-yard score, only got 1 foot down. And honestly, man, credit to Tutu. He's actually, that's an easy sentence to say, but he's actually had a couple solid catches out there. Looks like a little more than a field stretcher. I mean, are we interested in him in fantasy the rest of the year? Of course not. No one from this passing game, including Tyler Higbee, who's basically a full-time offensive tackle. I mean, so nothing in this passing game, but the run game, Dwain, I thought maybe we were moving towards Kyren Williams. 3 straight weeks, the snaps increased, the opportunities increased, and now that's all gone. Cam Akers, 73% snaps, 17 carries, and a target. I would like to say that Akers was really good with those touches, but I don't know, man. You still look at the overall numbers on the season. Maybe today was his best game of the year. He did find the end zone twice, but yeah, 53 running backs have at least 50 carries, and Cam Akers is dead freaking last in terms of yards per carry. So I get it. Yards per carry is not the only stat to, evaluate a running back by, but when you're dead last, what that tells me is there's probably also a problem with your offensive line. And guess what? That all goes into the fantasy points involved. So Cam Akers, even after this performance, Dwain, I mean, Kyren was the one with over 70% snaps last week. Can we really be confident in this continuing?
It was game script. This was game script. The game stayed. They stayed in a really close game. They played a good game today against the Seahawks. Like, this game it was close to the end. It was never a blowout over the Rams. So Cam Akers had 63% of the rushing attempts. If we look over the last couple of games, Cam Akers been around 60 to 70% of the rushing attempts. They were able to run the ball more today. They only dropped back to pass 58% of the time because of the way the game script worked out. And so that is what flipped it. Their roles did not change. To your point, Kyren Williams still 91% of the long down and distance, 100% of the 2-minute offense. So it just is what it is. Depending on how the game script goes, which most often will probably benefit Williams, right? It's most often going to benefit Williams. Today it didn't. It just so happened that Cam Akers, it worked out perfectly. Good for him. He scored the 2 touchdowns, but it'll still be really hard to trust.
Final note, Sean McVay did confirm that Matt Stafford has a spinal cord contusion and likely done for the season. So if you're holding out hope for him coming back, which we were not, he is not going to be out there. So John Wolford, Bryce Perkins should be out there the rest of the way. Probably already talked a little too much about the Rams than we needed to. 49ers took down the Dolphins 33-17. One of the better games of the day, at least anticipated wise. It was closer than this throughout the game. It got a little bit out of hand there at the end with some late, not meaningless touchdowns, but, Tua fumbles, they pick up the ball, scoop and score type of situation there in a game that otherwise was a 1-score one up until I think 5 minutes or so left in the fourth quarter. So credit the 49ers. Good teams win, great teams cover, and they did that as 5-point favorites. The over did cash as well at 46. So with the 49ers, man, the problem is another freaking lower body injury, and that is Jimmy Garoppolo. Going to miss the rest of the season with a broken left foot, setting up seemingly Brock Purdy, although they did go out and sign Josh Johnson, who is, continuing his quest of playing for every single NFL team out there. So with Brock Purdy, Dwain, hey, it was one performance. He got thrown in there in the fire. We try not to judge these guys unless, they're having an actual time to start. And even then, we try to give them a couple games. That said, just 5.7 yards per attempt, took 3 sacks, and only had a 5.6 yard average target depth. When I checked how he stood up in the PFF passing grade, he was 19th among 26 qualified QBs. So we have seen Kyle Shanahan make Nick Mullins get him like a rabid fan base in the fantasy world. So I think that he can probably get Purdy to average 7 yards per attempt and not be atrocious, purely out of, schematic goodness. That said, Dwain, We want more than 7 yards per attempt, more than just a baseline offense. We have McCaffrey, Debo, Ayuk, George Kittle, a lot of guys in this offense that we are fully trusting down the stretch. And for right now, man, McCaffrey, thanks to that aforementioned 5.7 average target depth from Purdy, he's the only one that I'm really all that confident firing up like nothing changed, because we did see McCaffrey 81% snaps, 17 carries, 10 targets. I mean, whatever knee irritation he was dealing with was not a problem here. And this, I don't think, not a coincidence that Elijah Mitchell was out of the picture. We have seen them give him this more workhorse role without Mitchell there. So McCaffrey, I'm not worried about. We saw this dude, one terrible Panthers offense after another, be one of the best fantasy football running backs we've ever freaking seen. Like whatever, Dwayne, if you're under center, I'm sure CMC could find his way to 100 yards and or a touchdown, which he has now done in 32 consecutive games, because I am not counting last week. He was injured with knee irritation, of course. Other than McCaffrey, though, Dwayne, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, are these even guys we need to start here down the stretch with Brock Purdy under center? I guess Kittle, obviously, because it's tight end, but Debo and Ayuk.
Yeah, they're still all explosive. So, I mean, they're all boom bust plays besides McCaffrey. I mean, I look at Debo as a low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3, but he's put the word boom bust in front of that. Same thing for Ayuk. He's been living on the touchdowns. And, Ayuk is really the guy they go deeper down the field to. He's the guy, he's their man beater. So if you play a lot of man coverage, they typically go to Ayuk. But if Purdy's going to be the check down king, it could really help Debo and CMC, right? That would be the two that it would help the most. I don't know that there's anything really sticky to take with that, like to just say, hey, this is really going to be a great thing for Debo and not for Ayuk. I think overall is probably something we look as a slight downgrade. The good news is it's not like Jimmy G was this 350-yard passer, right? He's a guy coming out there throwing for 250. So Purdy today was probably on his way to 250 if he plays really the whole game. He was at 210. He had 2 touchdown passes. They signed Josh Johnson. To your point, like, this is one offense that can scheme up and protect the quarterback. It's not going to be an elite passing attack, though, right? It's just It's not going to throw for 350 yards per game, just because that's not the way that it's built. The backup to CMC is worth mentioning. It was Jordan Mason. Now, I have no clue if that would change if something did happen to CMC, but I know a lot of us were looking at Tyrion Davis-Price as well as Jordan Mason, trying to determine last week, hey, which one do we go with? As of today, it really was Jordan Mason. TDP did not even have a snap. He was active. So there is that. And McCaffrey, yes, back to that full every down workload. So the Elijah Mitchell injury comes just in time. I know we never wish for injuries, but the CMC managers, if you manage to still squeak your team in, you're in really good shape.
Any featured running back that Kyle Shanahan drafts, we are erasing the draft capital, and we are just having Matt Waldman on the podcast, and we're listening to whatever he says, and just this is the one backfield that we just have no rhyme or reason. And again, the Shanahan family invented the idea that you can get by with any running back out there. Shanahan, Kyle, continues to prove to himself that he can do that. I mean, look at Mason out here, 8 carries, 51 yards. Yeah, maybe he is better than Tyrion Davis-Price. I don't know. But come on, man, just keep giving yourself these cheap shots at these guys. Elijah Mitchell from last season. How many times does Kyle need to see this happen? They traded for oh my gosh. You guys know all these moves. It's just crazy, because he's gone out of his way now, going back, giving McKinnon serious money, giving Coleman serious money. These keep blowing up in his face, but they don't really blow up because he keeps getting by with a low drafted or an undrafted backup. And at some point, shouldn't he just make that the main strategy? I don't know. So good points.
Makes sense to me. Makes sense to me, Hartitz.
We'll see. So as I like to say, Shanahan's going to forget more about football than I will ever know. Keep that with a grain of salt, but just interesting to see here over the years. Oh, we got the Russian porn bots in the chat now. That's when you've been podcasting for a while. Welcome everyone. Just trying to, win some fantasy games. We don't judge who wants to listen to the podcast. Final few notes. Debo almost had a 29-yard score. Probably should have gotten a DPI right there at the goal line when Xavier Howard cut across early. Was not called. Juwan Jennings had a step for a nice little 20-yard gain, but Purdy sailed it wide. And CMC dropped a 3-yard touchdown. They went right back to him, and he caught it. So another reverse sheesh from CMC and AJB today. Love to see that. On the other side of the ball, another injury to talk about. I did not see an update, but Tua had that late ankle injury. So, Dwayne, we can continue to throw that one stat out there about the Dolphins being undefeated in games where Tua finishes. Never mind that this game was over anyway by the time that Tua got that ankle injury. Why let the truth get in the way of a good tweet? As
it sounds like he's going to be fine, though.
Yeah. Okay. That is good to hear.
Yeah.
And if he is going to be fine, man, guess what? This offense is going to be fine. I mean, the fact that this was a bad game from Tua, like 100%. He missed a ton of throws out there that we're not used to seeing him miss. Jalen Waddle, I counted 3 potential 20-yard gains that unfortunately weren't there. And Tyreek had another 20-yard missed opportunity that was a little high. Jeff Wilson, man, one of the few times we saw him out there, which I guess he was actually out there 38% snaps, but I feel like it was more like
0.3 fantasy points out of Jeff Wilson today.
Oh my gosh, just
jeez.
And out of nowhere, man, just out of nowhere with the way that usage was looking. So that is tough to swallow. But bro, like the corner sat down. The guy that was supposed to carry the wheel route, like, did not carry it. And if Tua just could have put it on him, I mean, he was off the races for a potential 70-yard house call. Wasn't meant to be. So again, bad game from Tua. But guess what? It was 160-minute game. Like, I feel like Tua has this thing going on where we almost judge his entire career and his future by like 60-minute intervals every single time he's out there. So he's just one of the guys.
Fantasy wise, I mean, he's still 295 and 2. Like,
right.
You'll freaking take it any day of the week. Like, especially this year.
So another one of those things where I think we struggle when we have such great receivers like Tyreek Hill. You know, Tyreek goes for $146 and a touchdown because he's Tyreek Hill. And it's like, yeah, maybe Tua had a little bit to do with that. So always, again, I think Tua's good. I don't think he's amazing. I don't think he's bad. I think he's good. And I think we'll have better games down the road when he's not playing a freaking juggernaut defense that is Nick Bosa and the San Francisco 49ers. So
missing both tackles too.
Oof. My goodness. So yeah, Tyreek, Waddle still firing them up with all the confidence in the world. And Tua is going to continue to be a top 6 fantasy quarterback. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, top 6. And you didn't have Teron Armstead, like I mentioned. You also didn't have Austin Jackson. So your 2 start. Now he gets the ball out quick. Tua's a quick time to throw kind of guy, and that's the way they've got the offense set up. But still, it doesn't help when you're playing the freaking 49ers. He was under pressure more today, and it's a really good defense, and you were playing, away. So still coming through with 295 and 2. I get it. Like, knock him out of the – I never really thought he should be in the MVP conversation. I like Tua. I just didn't think he was quite at that level. So fine. People got to take him out of that conversation. He probably shouldn't have been in it anyway, but he's still really good, playing really well, and he's really good for fantasy. Like, he's great for fantasy still. Jalen Waddle did get hurt in the game, missed a little bit of the time, came back in. Then he ultimately missed some more time. He was only out there for 54% route participation. So we'll just kind of have to keep an eye on him, see what happens. The backfield, man, it just totally flipped. And now there weren't a lot of carries, but 61% of the snaps went to Raheem Mostert, 37% to Jeff Wilson. You had 49% route participation to Mostert, only 38% to Jeff Wilson. Rushing attempts, there were only 8, but 89% of those went to Raheem Mostert. He had 7 to only 1 for Jeff Wilson. And then we saw the 2-minute offense, 100% of that also went to Raheem Mostert. Okay, I'm opening that. It was only 1 snap, so just forget that I said that. 50% of the long down. Sometimes I don't have like all my stuff open when I'm looking. I just see the percentages. But 50% of the long down and distance work went to Mostert, 25% to Jeff Wilson. So just another one of these backfields, Ian, where you can get value out of it because this is a good offense. But now moving forward, are we dealing with more of a 49ers, old school 49ers hot hand? Like, that's what this feels like to me. We saw Jeff Wilson get the hot hand for 2 weeks. Now we're back to Raheem Mostert. Nobody had a hot hand today, but apparently, like, they thought Raheem Mostert, I guess, had the hot hand. He did have a better offensive grade, 71.6 PFF offense grade versus 38.8 for Wilson. So they were probably right, but only 3 points for Mostert, even though he took over just in a really tough matchup. But now it's just going to be hard to rank one of these guys over the other. It's just going to feel like either one, you could have the rug pulled out from under you in the next game.
Maybe that was why they were really seemingly force-feeding McCaffrey. Like, they just couldn't stand to live in a stadium where, Mostert and Wilson just going off and outperforming CMC in their respective revenge games there. So just something to keep in mind. But one final note here, just again, because if we're saying that Tua is still putting up these numbers, but not exactly having the best game, that certainly means someone was, and that was the wide receivers. Trent Sherfield, first play of the game, I believe. If it wasn't the first, it was the second. 75-yard catch and run. He's been flashing out there, Dwain. I mean, there are plays where it's like, which, speedy Dolphins receiver is that? And you're like, oh shit, that's actually Trent Sherfield. I mean, he has been flashing throughout there this year. They signed Cedric Wilson to be that guy, but Trent just took that job, seemingly is making some good plays with it. And with Tyreek, again, man, just in my opinion, he's been the best wide receiver in the league this year. I would have to say, man, I'd give Tyreek Offensive Player of the Year. I'm not so sure who else deserves it. Justin Jefferson, I realize, is constantly in that conversation as well. But just Tyreek, man, amazing NFL defenses are just hopeless at trying to even contain this guy, it seems like. And even in games where he can't get going downfield, they just start feeding him underneath, and you look up and he's just already got, 7 catches for 70 yards in a game that you didn't think he was doing much of anything in. So he is now on pace this season for 136 catches, 1,954 yards, and somehow just 7 touchdowns. Like, that's the wild part here. We haven't seen him booming much with trips to the end zone. Like, again, this guy is a couple more good games away from maybe getting 2,000 receiving yards, and there's somehow a higher ceiling out there for Tyreek Hill. That's how good 2022 has been for the Cheetah. AFC West here. Raiders took down the Chargers 27-20, covering as 2.5-point favorites. The under did cash at 49.5. So, hey, Derek Carr keeps existing in those, 1 to 3 seconds between getting the snap and throwing Devontae Adams the ball. I mean, this team had 250 passing yards and Devontae had 177 of them. And it was easy, Dwayne. He had 2 touchdowns. It could have been more. I mean, he had a incredible catch down the sideline. I mean, it was Devontae Adams and Jamar Chase both had these amazing one-handed catches that only would have been good for like 15 yards, but it just shows you the different plane of existence that some of these wide receivers seem to be operating on this season. And he had a chance for a 3rd short touchdown, but it went off his hands in the back of the end zone. So Devontae Adams, hell, the way he's playing, man, him, Tyreek, Justin Jefferson, just the way these wide receivers are performing this year. Not that it's crazy because last year, again, Cooper Kupp wasn't a tier of his own. He was having a fantastic season before getting injured himself, but there really are these, 5-6 guys at the top of the league just having one great week after another. So Adams, he has 5 straight games now with at least 7 catches. And when he's blowing up, man, it's just winning you your weeks. 4 games now with at least 120 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. So, hey, it's Devontae Adams and it's everyone else. We did get a dud from Foster Moreau, only had a 32-yard catch, and he did miss a little time while going through the concussion protocol. But yeah, Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, pretty simple in Las Vegas to win.
Yeah, pretty easy. It's just a really consolidated offense. We did see a 32% target share for Matt Collins. He was not able to do much with it. That's 9 targets, 5 receptions for only 35 yards. But, if you got a guy getting the targets, it's fine. You mentioned Foster Moreau did miss some time. He was still out there 72% of the routes. We'll see what the Raiders do with Darren Waller. I do believe he's eligible in the next game to come back. I don't know if the Raiders are going to want to push that or not, or they just go ahead and leave him on IR, leave him out for the season. Like, I don't know why you might want to risk anything to Darren Waller for next season. We'll have to see what they do there. Josh Jacobs, yeah, I mean, there's nothing to say, dude. Dude's just going he's just going nuts. 26 carries, 144 yards, and a rushing touchdown. 3 receptions again for 11 yards. We're in the fantasy playoffs over at the FFPC, and that's because their playoffs start in week 13. And if you're in the fantasy playoffs, if you don't have Josh Jacobs on your roster, he's almost guaranteed on the team you're playing against because he has single-handedly brought people into the fantasy playoffs. Over at the FFPC right now, Ian, 48% of the teams that have Josh Jacobs on their roster were the number 1 or 2 seed in their league without looking at any of the rest of their roster. That's insane. By just taking Josh Jacobs in the 6th round of your fantasy draft, 7th round, we saw him go in the 8th round once. How did we not? How come we're so stupid that we weren't the ones taking him? We'll save that for the offseason. We'll have to, we need some time. We need some time to let that sit. But I was kind of looking at it and I was like, okay, like, man, Jacobs really hadn't done much. Honestly, I felt good to come out of a lot of these matchups with him only having 24.5 because I was just so worried it was about to turn into a 40. I was just closing my eyes at the end of the game every time he got it because the Chargers suck against the run. You know this. And right away in the early part of the game, man, they ran a perfectly blocked play. Like, he gets to the hole. There's a block down. There's a block down by the guard. And then Matt Collins comes across and just cleans up the linebacker. And I mean, just the whole side of the right field's open, right? And he goes in for like 20-yard touchdown run. And so to come away with only 24.5 in my face, like, I felt pretty good about it because this dude is just playing great. And the Raiders are blocking really, really well for Josh Jacobs right now.
We're gonna catch the next Josh Jacobs, Dwayne. I'm confident in that. And hey, we had a similar conversation about DK Metcalf, I remember, because we were like, at what point do we just have a really talented player? And maybe we didn't give Jacobs enough credit for that.
I agree.
Again, plenty of time this off season. We got Mojo asking if we're going to be talking more off season. Yeah, we'll see, Mojo. Maybe a little more on that one of these days. But look, this was a freaking smash spot, and guess what? Josh Jacobs smashed it. That's what you should do in smash spots. I mean, the Chargers have now allowed over 150 rushing yards in 6 consecutive games. They've really fallen off the map ever since losing Joey Bosa there, in the middle of week 2. But I always try to, before getting on this podcast, quickly run through some of our advanced stats over on PFF Ultimate to find just outlier performances. And my God, this was one of them. Because again, box score, you're impressed enough already, but 112 of his 144 rushing yards came after contact, and he forced 14 missed tackles on the ground, Dwain. Only week 5, Dameon Pierce has done more than that in one game this season. On the season now, Josh Jacobs, 78 missed tackles forced on the ground. Chubb is in second place at 66. So I've talked about sometimes missed tackles forced, maybe being a little more descriptive, talking more about a run style than something to necessarily be like, oh, this guy is for sure the best running back in the league because look at the broken tackles. But yeah, Jacobs has that, and he has everything else you could look for as well. Incredible season from, the fantasy MVP, I think we can say at this point, relative to where they were drafted. On the other side of the ball, disappointing game from a Chargers team. But, there's moments like at the end of the game where it's a 4th and ball game and the result is a 50-50 ball, DeAndre Carter on the sideline. And I start to wonder if maybe I shouldn't be blaming all the talent involved quite as much there. So Justin Herbert, he did lose a pair of fumbles. He fumbled twice. He recovered both of them. So that's good. He did take 5 sacks out there. So it wasn't a perfect performance, but can we just tell this dude like every play is 4th down? I have not seen any quarterback convert more of these, 4th and 10, 15 plus yards. And he seems to save the best ones for the Raiders. Awesome 35-yard strike to Keenan Allen to at least keep the Chargers in the game a little bit longer. And yeah, we did have a bit of a dud here from Eckler, but even in Eckler's duds, man, he's going for over 100 total yards and he added 5 total receptions to the total. So really good to see Keenan Allen still have some juice here. I mean, I wasn't that confident that we would see him come back from the hamstring and play as well as he has over the past couple of weeks. Could have seen some bigger performances from the other auxiliary pieces. I mean, Eckler almost had a 15-yard touchdown in the end zone go off his hands. And even Gerald Everett had the ball in his hands in the back of the end zone for a potential 25-yard score. Just couldn't get his feet down and maintain it through contact. Kind of how, you're supposed to make a catch, but it still qualifies as a sheesh. So, yeah, man, Keenan, Everett's doing a pretty good job. Eckler, we got Josh Palmer there. Justin Herbert's enabling a lot of guys out here, Dwain. And, it's got a little bit of an Arizona Cardinals vibe where we're always, wishing for more. But that's just because of how higher expectations are for the group. Still should see more good days ahead from everyone involved.
Yeah. And I still think like Justin Herbert overall just gives your passing offense a bigger ceiling than Kyler, right? I mean, he can make all the throws. Not that Kyler can't make them, but it's just a little bit of a struggle for Kyler.
Mahomes said that Herbert can make throws that he can't.
Yeah,
Mahomes said that.
Yeah, Herbert is still, insane. I don't necessarily understand the low ADOT stuff, like in the way they design everything in the offense. And I get it. It's not like they have a bunch of like speedsters, right? It's kind of back to whenever you tried to ask Will Fuller if he was coming back this week and it was the wrong Will Fuller. Like, could he please go to the Chargers? Even if it's the wrong Will Fuller, like they could go play for the Chargers. Just so we have someone to stretch the field out. But Keenan Allen, man, 30% target share. That was awesome to see. That's 2 out of the last 3 games where he's really played well. And Josh Palmer, I have to give the guy credit, man. Over the last 3 games or so, like he's played really well. Like he had not been demanding targets early in the season despite the playing time. Another good game today, 26% target share. So he is slowly starting to move up and a lot of the metrics that we like to look at as far as we start thinking about next year. Or if you're a dynasty player, like Palmer's doing some things that are looking pretty good. The last thing I'll say is Josh Kelly. We mentioned him last week. He kind of worked his way back into the split with Isaiah Spiller. It was all Josh Kelly today after Austin Eckler. 41% of the snaps, 41% of the rushing attempts, handled 63% of the long down and distance. So I do believe at this point, if we saw Austin Eckler go down, we would at least feel good about maybe putting Kelly at that low end RB2. Not that we want Eckler to go down. We love you, Austin Eckler. Never get hurt, Austin Eckler. If something did happen, Kelly probably low end RB2. I think we would feel comfortable enough, to say that. I still think that the other guys would be involved in, but it does look like they've clearly decided that he is the number 2 right now.
And they did this last year where it wasn't like Justin Jackson was blowing all these other guys out of the water every single week
Yeah.
as the backup. And then when Eckler got hurt, he really was the definitive starter. So now that we have seen Kelly get healthy and regain that job, I am with you. You can put him right there in that same group, Dontrell Hilliard, Matt Breida, as sneaky, solid, low-owned handcuffs out there. Bengals took down the Chiefs third time in the year 2022 because that late game season last year did in fact happen in 2022. So 27-24, they covered as 2.5-point home dogs, under cash just barely at 53. So yeah, Samaje Perine keeps on keeping on, man. 3 games now pretty much without Joe Mixon, 131 rushing yards in a score, 136 yards and 3 scores through the air, and looking good, man. Every single play out here today, I felt like he was stiff arming a dude or chugging along for extra yards. Like, he has surprised me. I like Samaje Perine over the past 3 weeks and recommended him as, a pretty solid tier 1, tier 2 handcuff a few weeks before that, just because of the workload. And I thought the Bengals really liked him. But every now and then, Dwayne, these NFL coaches who've been doing this their whole life seem to know a little bit more about football than we do when it comes to player evaluation sometimes. So Samaje Perine just playing great. And I mean, PPR RB2, RB10 last week. And after having 155 total yards, probably going to have another top 12 finish. I tend to think Joe Mixon will come back and get his usual workload, but at a minimum, man, this is really changing the way I think we view Perine in the grand lexicon of handcuff running backs.
Yeah, and the difference for Perine is with Mixon out, he's getting all the passing down work plus all the early down work. Whenever Mixon earlier in the year was struggling a little bit, is because a lot of the passing down work gets taken away from him. Now, it's still okay. Again, we talk about, the different recipes that can make you a good fantasy football, asset as far as being a running back. You don't have to always have all the passing downs if you play on a good offense like the Bengals. So you're still going to have a good chance to come through. And we've already seen Mixon obviously have a huge game, before he got hurt. I mean, the guy scored how many touchdowns that game? Ian, was it 4 or 5? I can't remember.
5, I think.
Yeah. I think it was 5. And so Perine, though, to your point, has played well. Like, just watching him, like, he's like a bowling ball, like just really low center of gravity. That's the thing I kept seeing. It's like, dude, you're not getting lower than Samaje Perine. Like, he just was getting lower than every tackler. I'm sure that was something you never liked as a linebacker, Ian, when you had one of these guys that would just get super low on you, like, especially because you're a taller guy. Like, and Perine, he's probably like 5'8". Can you imagine you're trying to get under his pads? Like, it's not an easy thing to do.
I was an ankle biter out there sometimes, Dwayne. I mean, look, I was far too skinny to be playing middle linebacker. You got to survive out there, man.
Well, I don't blame you for that, man. But yeah, Perine's looked really good. We'll see what happens with Mixon. We did see Chris Evans. He was only out there 3% of the snaps, but
you see what he did with it.
his one target, 1 reception, 8 yards and a touchdown.
Just a walk-in too. Like, come on, he's made some awesome plays, and we've complimented him for that. But like seemingly the one route he runs, like for Perine, just oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's like we wanted that to go to Perine. Let's be honest. But yeah, 21.3 points for Perine. So there's really I don't think there won't be a way that he's not in the top 12 this week. We also did see the return of Jamar Chase, and he immediately led the team in target share, 27%. We had 17% to Tyler Boyd, 13% to T. Higgins. Of course, he was able to get in with a touchdown. T. Higgins is going to be fine, but it was nice, Ian, to see Jamar Chase get back out there. 93% route participation. They told us he really would not be capped. That was the case, and he was targeted plenty. You can feel really good about Chase just being his normal self the rest of the way, and that's a good thing for the fantasy playoffs.
And look back to his normal self, which goes hand in hand with what he was honestly. He gave a real nice revealing interview with someone and was just saying that he wasn't even going to be practicing unless he felt like he was 100%. So kudos to Chase and the Bengals for obviously handling that situation well. And now we got a healthy Jamar Chase for the stretch run. I mentioned when we were talking about the Raiders, though, but Chase, man, just freaking the stick him on his hands. I don't know what the hell he has going on there, but incredible catch down the sideline. We did have though, unfortunately, one of the biggest shooshas of the season on behalf of Tyler Boyd. Yeah. My God, man, they run a little rub route thing, get him so wide open, and Joe Burrow's perfectly thrown pass literally bounced off his face mask. So 4 catches, 60 yards for Boyd. Yeah, his other 4 targets went all really well. Not that one. Shoulda, coulda, woulda been an 18-yard score. Instead, it'll probably be featured as my sheesh of the week here come Tuesday.
You can't have time to think about it. That's the problem. Like, that was one of those where it was like just slow-mo. You're like, there's no one around me. The ball's just floating at my face. Like, there's too much time, man. Too much time to be thinking about it.
Also did have Hayden Hurst suffer a calf injury, so keep an eye on that. He has been playing pretty banged up throughout the season, so might need to go back to the tight end waiver wire. Just, if you got Hayden Hurst, I already know you've been through a lot over there, so just, keep on keeping on for another few weeks. And yeah, man, only other note was Joe Burrow's continuing to provide some rushing goodness, 46 yards on the ground and a rushing touchdown. I mean, I don't think he's going to get, now Jalen Hurts was far more productive, but I was surprised to see, man, Joe Burrow, I think he's had 5 overall QB1 finishes since those last few weeks of last season. I mean, I know sometimes we go ahead.
Did you see the play where he was supposed to hand it? He should have handed it to P. Ryan, and then he didn't, and he decided it was an RPO, and then he decided just to follow him through the hole, and he just ran behind him. It was like a 15-yard run. Like Burrow got skinny through the hole, and he followed P. Ryan. It was pretty funny.
Someone threw a touchdown that actually got called back, I think, on an RPO. It might have been Burrow. I forget who it was to, but I think there might have been like a flag. Higgins, maybe? Yeah, I probably should have had this written down. Sorry, guys, but you could imagine on the other side of the ball with our Kansas City Chiefs, just one of those things where every time the Chiefs lose, we don't need to, reassess everything we know about Patrick Mahomes. That dude is still probably the single best quarterback walking the planet at this point in time, with all due respect. They're retired dudes. Chill out, everyone. But I'm not overall worried about the passing game upside here, just like with Travis Kelce. This was a dud. A Travis Kelce dud is 4 catches for 56 yards. That's how spoiled we are at this point. So it sucks. Is it going to happen again for either guy? I pretty much doubt it. What I am more concerned about, Dwain, is really just 4 targets for Juju Smith-Schuster. And what did you see from some of the utilization metrics? I mean, last week we knew it was his first game coming off the concussion. This week he did have a nice catch, and then they checked him out in the blue tent, but he was out there, I think, before the drive was even over. So if he missed any time due to that, I'm pretty confident saying it was only a few snaps. How did Juju's usage progress after last week's disappointing numbers?
Yeah, so number one, the utilization of multiple tight end sets did continue. You had Travis Kelce with 81% of the snaps, 59% to Noah Gray. Noah Gray had a 52% route participation, 87% to Travis Kelce. So you also had Joe Fortson involved a little bit. So they're using these 2 and 3 tight end packages more. What the good news is that last week we saw that really knock Juju Smith-Schuster off the field because he's the slot receiver. So they must have expanded his role. I haven't had a chance. I don't have the slot data pulled in. Actually, yeah, I do. Juju Smith-Schuster, look at me. 38% of his routes today came from the slot. So he was playing more outside. He wasn't limited just as a slot. That allowed him to be on the field for 81% route participation. Whereas last week we saw that number down below. It was well below 70%. I want to say high 60% or high 50% or low 60% last week. MVS was only out there for 61%. He did lead the team in targets, 24%, Juju at 19%. And here's the thing. That's where Juju's been all year, Ian, is a 19%, 22% guy. But guess what? It's normally when Patrick Mahomes is throwing for 350. So you're going to be fine on those games. Today, Patrick Mahomes only throws for 223 yards. A 19% target share gets you 4 targets, 3 receptions, 35 yards. So it's just really the Chiefs offense, right? And we're not going to sit here and say all of a sudden the Chiefs offense sucks. So you're probably fine with Juju. I do think Juju was kind of living high there for a little bit. He had a little 3-week stretch where he was probably out kicking, he was out kicking the coverage kind of thing. He's a fine wide receiver 3. Yep. As soon as you bench him, you're going to be pissed because he's going to score 2 touchdowns. He plays in the Chiefs offense. He is their lead receiver. MVS continues just to drop balls, do weird stuff. Dude, here's my biggest thing with the Chiefs. How can Sky Moore, Ian, if he's any good at all, not be on the field yet? MVS is just inviting himself to be taken off the field. He is not playing good. Justin Watson does not get targets. He's just out there, getting his steps in, as some people might say. So it really is, and you don't have no Kadarius Toney today. To me, it's really discouraging that Sky Moore, with all the bad things going on with the Chiefs, have not been able to get on the field. I think if anyone's still willing to give me anything for Sky Moore in Dynasty, I'm taking it. Just because he could get better next year, and we liked him coming out. We talked a lot about him this offseason, and he's a guy that, we drafted some. But a wide receiver to have this bad of a rookie season when the rest of the receivers in the room are not really doing anything to differentiate themselves, and then they go trade for Kadarius Toney, I just don't feel good about Sky Moore. I feel like there's just I prefer to move on from guys that just bust in the first year. Some will come back, but most of them don't. And so that's where I'm at on Sky Moore.
Well, I don't love when the wide receivers get worse and Andy's like, all right, time to put in Sky Moore. And he's like, Let's start leaning on these 2 and 3 tight end formations more than ever, because that's what they're doing out there. So if you don't want to hear from us, just go look at what Andy Reid's doing out there right now. Not looking good for Sky. But to the Juju point, yeah, just 27 pass attempts for Patrick Mahomes. After seeing that, good enough uses for Juju. Just a down game for the overall passing environment. Do you expect that to keep happening in Kansas City? Nope. So keep Juju in those starting lineups. Isaiah Pacheco, Dwain, has been getting fed here lately. Now, we had the first 2 games where he is the starter and we expected starting numbers and we did not get those. But over the last 4 games, once Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been removed from the equation, 16, 15, 23, and 16 touches. Now, here's the annoying part. Jerick McKinnon is on the field so much inside the 5-yard line. I looked at it for the season, man. Running back snaps inside the 5-yard line for the Chiefs. Jerick McKinnon has 29. CEH has 13. Pacheco only has 8. Now, 7 of those 8 for Pacheco were running plays, presumably to him. McKinnon only had 5 running plays on his 29 snaps inside the 5-yard line.
Yeah.
CEH only had 4. But that's another part of the equation is the Chiefs. Yes, Pacheco did find his way into the end zone again here. They throw the ball inside the 5-yard line more than just about anyone in the NFL. So with Pacheco, I'm come around very confident in him as this low end, even mid-tier RB2 in the right matchup. And he's been given that to us over the past 2 weeks. That said, Dwain, we did see Jerick McKinnon come in, play the same amount of snaps today, 8 carries and 2 targets. Like, is it ever going to happen with Pacheco getting higher than what this is? Because this isn't a bad spot. And I'm not, we are grasping straws a little bit here, but I just don't know there's that second stage. And honestly, if we're talking about just, again, low-owned bench stashes, Jerick McKinnon, out of everyone in this backfield that's employed by the Chiefs right now, he's the only guy I could actually trust them fully turning over the backfield to, because we've seen it at the end of last season in the playoffs when he played at least 70% of the snaps in every playoff game. And this year, like, the high leverage situations that the Chiefs care about on the goal line and in passing downs, that's all Jerick McKinnon.
Yeah, I think McKinnon is somebody you should have stashed. Like right now, it's just it's tough to start him. He needs the right kind of game script. He got the game script today. Lately, the Chiefs have been blowing everyone out, right? Or at least they beat pretty much everyone, or they play with a lead, and then that works to Pacheco's advantage. So you nailed it. When you're inside, like even today, inside the 10 snaps, 70% of those went to McKinnon, only 20% went to Pacheco, 10% went to Rojo. So once they decide they're going to run the ball, though, when they're inside the 5, they really do give it to Pacheco. And he's been getting like 1 or 2 of those chances, per game. So when you play on the Chiefs, you're going to be inside the 5 plenty. It's still fine. He's going to score. He's going to give you a chance to score 2 touchdowns every week. He is going to give you some games, though, where he may not score any, and you're not going to like it because you're going to get 7 points. He at least did get the 2 targets today. He had a target last week. So he's getting a little bit more involved in the passing game, like nothing crazy, but 10% target share. So it's funny. He and McKinnon, they tied in target share. But to your point, they split the snaps. And so it really it comes down to the game script. But your thing on McKinnon, like he's the guy that's available. Isaiah Pacheco's now been picked up everywhere. I agree, especially in deeper leagues. McKinnon should be rostered. If you're playing in any kind of league where there's like 20 players, right? You got 20, 18 players on your rosters. Like you should have Jerick McKinnon rostered in those.
Final one here. Sunday Night Football. Cowboys 54. They scored again after we tuned out Dwain. Colts 19. Cowboys covered easily as 10.5-point favorites. Game total at 44.5. I mean, this game going the fourth quarter was 21-19 Cowboys, and they scored 33 points in the fourth, 1 turnover after another from the Colts. Matt Ryan, 3 interceptions, and they also lost a pair of fumbles. They have now fumbled the ball 30 times this season. That's the one part people I think were missing a little bit if you weren't watching all the games of the Colts of early on, which, yeah, wouldn't blame you at all. Like, do something good with your life instead of subjecting yourself to that. But Matt Ryan, when he got put down on the bench, man, like more fumbles and interceptions than any other quarterback in the league. I mean, I was shouting out, like Carson Wentz threw 7 picks last year on this team. I think Matt Ryan had cleared that by like week 5. So it's been a terrible year for him keeping hold of the ball. And that's what happens when you face a Cowboys team that is now starting to blend one of the league's best defenses with an offense that's turning into a bit of a juggernaut themselves ever since they've had Dak Prescott back under center. So Dak, yeah, he had some misses, had a bad interception, almost had another one that just got bailed out on. when it was ruled that it hit the ground first. But Cowboys offense is really starting to flow. And again, the only kind of problem we see here, especially in the passing game, is a lack of volume because they don't have to keep their foot on the gas as long as they might if they had a worse defense. So CeeDee Lamb looks fantastic out there. I mean, they gave him the same like fly sweep 2 plays in a row, and just I feel like they could have kept doing it all the way down the field, man. I don't know what his pregame meal was, but his just yards after contact, catch, run, whatever you want to say, man, he looked great in the open field. And he started off from the beginning when he had that touchdown where he just managed to stay on his feet. You always see the guys, their forearm or their ankle or something hit the ground there, not CeeDee Lamb. So great game from him. Michael Gallup, best game of the year. He caught 2 touchdowns, a fade, and also, I forget what the first one was, but hey, it was a touchdown, so it must have been pretty cool. Tony Pollard, 2 touchdowns. Zeke, a touchdown. Malik Davis, a touchdown. We've seen the Cowboys even last year, Dwayne, like when they really get running, they can become a front running monster in a hurry. And it's pretty good to have the fantasy guys here. I mean, they scored 54 points. What more are we supposed to say here? Pretty fantastic performance from Dak and company.
Yeah, and just they didn't have to do a lot, to your point. They got a short field quite often. So when you look at Dak's numbers, he's going to give you 170 yards passing, but it could have been more. Like, it easily could have been more. And now the Cowboys really have been a balanced offense, so we're not seeing Dak drop back and throw the ball 40 times anymore. Like, on average, like, Dak's throwing the ball 26, 27, 28, 29, 30 times. He threw it 30 times tonight. He's had a much higher average in recent weeks. But again, some of this comes down to when they were getting the ball, they were already on a condensed field because they were like 30 yards away from scoring. So that definitely factored in. But he came through with the 3 touchdown passes. So you're feeling good about it. Zeke and Pollard, they're still splitting up the backfield, but both guys are getting their work. Pollard doing the explosive stuff. Zeke still getting a score too. Yeah, dude, like, everything is clicking right now. 7 targets for Gallup to go along with 7 for Lamb. So he tied for the team lead. It looks really good.
The only guy that didn't boom was Dalton Schultz, and he almost did, man. He had a 14-yard touchdown in the end zone in his hands. Linebacker made a great play to knock it out at the last second. So great call by Mojo in the chat. I mean, OBJ visiting the Cowboys tomorrow, had to go get all those points up. Wow, they could.
Man, I don't want them to sign OBJ if it's a multi-year deal. I do not want.
Why? He's going to look so good with the star in his
helmet, but you don't
man.
want to give him a 3-year deal for no, come on, man.
The pregame visors and the cleats.
That'll be cool, but I don't want OBJ on like a 3-year deal. Like, and that's the thing they're saying, because he has so many teams, after him, and good for him. Like, OBJ should do this, right? He should use his negotiating leverage. Teams treat players like a complete piece of meat. So I'm pro player. Like, I want these players to get paid. I want them to get their contracts. I just would hate to see Dallas. They've got other things that they need to do in the coming off seasons. I don't want to see them sink a bunch of money into OBJ. If they can get the right kind of deal, I'm not saying I don't want him. I just don't want to. I don't want to hear tomorrow that you get OBJ 3 years on a $60 million deal. I'm going to be like, you should have just kept Amari Cooper if you're going to do that.
You're right, but think about the swag potential, Dwayne. That's all. I
can't stop you. I can't stop this. Just listen.
I have nothing else to add to that other than just think about the swag.
He will look cool. You're right. He will.
Cool. On the Colts side of things, they do have a week 14 bye, so maybe Jeff Saturday still has some tricks up his sleeve. But yeah, I mean, look, they found a way to get Jonathan Taylor 24 touches. He did eclipse the 100-yard mark, but just couldn't really break off anything too big. He had Leighton Vander Esch made an awesome play in the flat to stop. Who I think had a chance to go and be as explosive play. So good job on Leighton, really turning his career around over the past year or two. It seemed like he was on the Jalen Smith, train right out of town there for a second. But, funny things happen, I guess, when you buy into a Micah Parsons-led defense. And yeah, otherwise, I mean, Chris Collinsworth was saying it throughout the broadcast, like the Colts would throw downfield and they would have success against this banged up secondary. I mean, Ashton Dulin sent Trayvon Diggs straight to the shadow realm. I felt bad, Dwayne, because like Diggs has really avoided that most of the season. I mean, this really has been.
He was completely jumping that.
Oh, I know. But like that, if you haven't been watching a ton of Cowboys games, you just turned on in prime time. You're like, oh, same old Trayvon Diggs. Yep. He has gotten a lot better this year, but yeah, tough to say anything about that one other than that was pretty brutal there. Michael Pittman dudded. That's an unfortunate reality in this pretty bad offense overall. Alec Pierce had a good game, but like, can we expect that to really persist? I sure can't. Any final notes here on the Colts, Dwayne?
No, man, they're just spreading it around on offense now. We're kind of seeing it rotate around. Paris Campbell for a few weeks was the big deal. Last week we saw Jelani Woods get involved. few weeks back, we saw Pierce with, I think it was 3 weeks ago, we saw Pierce with quite a few targets, wasn't able to come through. Similar thing tonight, 8 targets. He did get 4 receptions for 86 yards, but that's bad for Michael Pittman. 4 targets today, 2 receptions, 16 yards. So they're really just kind of spreading things around. It's not something where we're seeing Michael Pittman dominate like what we kind of thought we might get, especially early in the season, like week 1. Like if you were looking at your week 1 box scores with Michael Pittman, you probably thought, oh man, I got a wide receiver 1 on my hands. No, you don't. Just kidding. He's probably going to end up settling in, like in the way that I look at him moving forward. Like next year will be like a wide receiver 3.
And with that, we have wrapped up another edition of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, game by game review. We'll be back here week 14, 15, and 16. 3 more on the tap. Favorite show of the week, my friend Dwain. Let the people know what they can find over at MB FantasyLife. And don't forget to pitch your guys' $20, $30 per issue newsletter, however the hell you guys have driven that up.
Yeah, we should charge for it, but we don't, because we love fantasy players. We want to do the right thing for all the fantasy players. There's a lot of great content out there. I am thankful that we do put it out for free, but you guys, you go sign up for it over at fantasylife.com. You get it direct to your inbox every morning. Get a 5-minute read. It's myself, Peter Overzet, the rest of our team helping cover everything going on in the league. We just make sure you're up to date on everything. You don't have to, you get to work, you got to take a quick glance at it. You may need to hit the waiver wire real quick, but you're all caught up. You don't have to be thinking about it all day. Oh my God, what did I miss? What am I missing? I'm going to be in an important meeting. No, we already got you covered. So go check it out. Obviously, the rankings, tiers, utilization, all of that information's on the site as well, and constantly launching new tools. The newest thing's the Game Hub. Completely awesome. You guys go check that out. You can look at every single game. We've got our bets in there. We've got overs, unders, props. We've got fantasy stuff. Like it's awesome. Everything in one spot. So that's really sweet. But yeah, go check it out. And it is FREE.
Oh, another E.
FREE.
Oh, yeah. Okay. It's late.
Give
me a break, man.
Add like 2 more and some exclamation points, like free.
At Dwain McFarland on Twitter. Always great job, my friend. We'll be back here on the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast on Tuesday with our usual waiver show with Nathan Yonke. I am trying to figure out what to do next. And once I know, I will let all you guys know. So appreciate all the support over the years, everyone. And we will continue to get those lineups ready to win some championships and have fun doing it. Great day to be great after all. So for Dwain, I'm Ian. Thanks so much for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.